it's actually been a while since I checked. I think I've still only seen it the once. I think I watched it a while ago, and I've not revisited yet. So maybe I should give it a revisit before I check out your episode.
Yeah, it's so fun, and Shutter has it still on there. I mean, I actually found the DVD, which I guess is hard to find, but I spend my weekends like going to like secondhand places like Disc Replay, which is a place here with like old DVDs, they have Blu-rays, they have newer stuff, they have video games, and I just dig for hours and I find all this treasure. And I think I paid like $3 for it. And people are like, that's out of print. And I'm like, really? Cool.
Yeah, but you always find really cool stuff.
I do. It's like a knack. It's one of those weird talents, useless talents, I guess.
I don't think I would call that a useless talent. I think that's a pretty useful talent.
It's very time consuming, so I guess it's a hobby. But I usually come out pretty cool with it. I'm sorry for the hat. I look terrible in hats, but I'm currently transitioning back to blonde hair,
Oh.
and it's like a process because I'm naturally blonde, and I'm just like I've done the black for 5 years, so I had to cover it up because it's in the process and it looks like crap.
I
So
don't
I'm
think
like,
I've ever known you as a blonde.
oh yeah, you haven't.
I don't think I have.
Actually, no, when we first met, I think I was blonde. No, because it's been 4 years. So when we first met, I was blonde. It was right before I dyed my hair black.
Oh, okay. So right back at the very
But you
beginning.
didn't. But we hadn't seen each other
Yeah, yeah,
yet.
yeah, yeah. That's
So by the
right.
time we saw each other, I had black hair.
Yeah. Wow. That seems like an age ago.
It was a while ago for sure. I have so many Maniac shirts. I am the only one that I have more of is Nightmare on Elm Street. I had to pick one of the main like cool. This was like kind of this old timey it's a Fright Rags one. And they did sort of like a sort of what's that guy New York Post guy Norman Rockwell. That's something else. So it's in that style, but it's like him nailing the scalp on. You can't really see it with the background there, and it's like old timey with like the 5 cents and
I was just saying just before you came into the chat, I was saying to the chat, I was like, this because we originally, I'm gonna intro the episode in a couple of minutes, but before we get into it, I was like, we originally this was gonna be your bucket list horror movie, and
oh
and
yeah.
and I was like, and I don't know if you've listened to the ones that we've released so far. I think we've got about 5 or 6 out there at the
Hmm.
minute, but most of them we keep to like 30 to 40 minutes, and I was like, I just going in my head and I was like, I don't think I can continue to just half an hour on this movie.
No, I was that's gonna be a tough one. You'd have I mean, I think you got the hosting skills to maybe rein me in,
Well,
but it's a tough job.
I decided that I wasn't gonna test myself like that and just this is just now a full episode.
That's awesome because we covered it a couple of years ago and I've been wanting to revisit it and because I have things to add because I watch it at least once a month.
Yeah.
And you know,
Wow.
um I just wanted to revisit it for a long time. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, it's I feel like I've been saying this quite a lot for a lot of the episodes that we've recorded over the past few months, but this is again one of those ones that I've just not talked about yet on any form of podcast. A
Oh, I'm
couple,
excited because I'm like the authority. I have no notes.
it was like when we released our episode on Jaws, me and Nico were having that discussion. I was like, oh, we haven't, we just never got, it's just not through leaving it out on purpose or, not wanting to talk about it. It just didn't quite come round yet in the sort of rotation of movies, which I'm sure you guys have got tons
Yeah,
and
like
tons
we
of,
haven't done the first Nightmare on Elm Street
yeah,
for
like
whatever reason,
there you
and
go,
that's so random.
we've got and we've still got a ton of those types of movies, and this is one of them. And for those watching, this is an episode that's been several months in the making because we decided we were going to talk about this episode, I think about 3 or 4 months ago, possibly longer.
Oh yeah, and then like we both had like a bunch of stuff going on in our lives, and then we were gonna do it, and I went to Vegas for the third jamboree, Joe Bob's jamboree for the last drive-in, and that was a fucking blast. I got some funny stories from that, but I should do an episode just on that at some point. And then I got
Anyways,
really sick. I had like the flu, and I'm
yeah.
just now getting over it. So
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
yeah. Oh my God, it was
That's always
so
good.
bad.
Yeah, and that, yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. So like we both just had like tons going on. I
Oh yeah.
Halloween, like I always get really downhearted with myself on podcasting around Halloween because I can never throw myself into it as much as I can, just because of the industry that I work in. That it's one of our busiest times of the year, which actually leaves me less time to do the podcasting, so I have to like cram everything in as much as possible. So for the last couple of years, I always sort of I've felt like I've almost not let people down, but just like not quite been as present as I want to be. So I'm really
Yeah,
hoping.
we were going through the same thing at the same time because we had kind of a lull. We had so much going on in everybody's different lives because there's just so many people to coordinate. And so
Yeah,
we
like
had kind of a lull,
I
but I'm,
find it
I'm putting out an episode.
sorry, I find it
We're
difficult.
doing
I find it difficult enough just to coordinate Nico, so I don't know how you coordinate the other five members of your team.
I got that bossy, gently bossy attitude, and I'm very organized. So
Well,
I just sometimes I'm just like we're gonna do this, and it's happening.
I,
So
I remember I remember when I first started podcasting, and I was super organized with like everything that I did. Everything was really structured, everything was really organized,
hmm
everything was really planned out. And now I don't think I could be more opposite now. I'm just
I'm
like,
a lot more laid back just because we always have at least six people regulars, our regular people, and you're in our chat. So
yeah,
we have people that are on, they're frequent guests, like we that are family members. We consider them. You're one of them, and then we have people who just guest a lot.
yeah,
So we always have eight or so people. Sometimes it's a little smaller. Sometimes it
yeah.
just is six. So
Yeah, I
I've
think
gotten a lot more
it's
lax.
always a really cool thing because obviously we've started bringing Anna on board now slightly more often. She's done a few episodes for us now. She's done our Insidious episode. She's done our Five Nights at Freddy's episode. And she gets really excited
That's
about.
so cool.
I think she's done one other episode for us as well. I think she did our Saw 10 episode. So she's done like a few episodes for us now. But it is really cool having because we're pretty essentially the same. We have that sort of family, and it's I think it's always really nice to be able to call upon sort of four or five people, because Nico again, like I think I'm finally managing to pin Nico down this week, but again, so I had like contacted yourself and contacted Boomer and contacted Wren and contacted Tim and like managed to get like a whole load of shit organized and planned out. And I was
Yeah, those are all just wonderful people to have on too.
yeah,
All of them.
exactly. So
Love every
it's
single one of
great.
them.
Anyways, with that being said, because I think we're both, I, I said I was
We're
going to
both
find
wordy.
I said I was going to find this difficult to keep us to half an hour. We've pretty much done like 10 minutes already, and we've not even started discussing the episode. So I'm going to intro the actual podcast now, because I think you probably should do that. So hello and welcome everyone to the Pod of the Damned. I'm your host Ian. Joining me this week is not my regular either of my sort of regular or semi-regular co-hosts. Nico is still unavailable. Anna's working on a /works night out tonight, but we're joined by one of our most regular guest appearance co-hosts. It's Candy from the House That Screams Horror Podcast. I think this is your fourth appearance on the show, fifth appearance on the show. I've lost count now.
Oh, I think we're past that.
I think we're
we're maybe
way past
six
that.
or seven.
I think between all of the shows that we've ever done, we've collabed way over into the. I think we're probably approaching 20 episodes between us, between our.
Oh yeah,
various
like
shows.
yeah,
So
definitely just with you on our show and being on your show and your show before. So yeah, it's a lot of numbers.
yeah, absolutely. So for
I always
everyone,
appreciate you wanting to have me on because most people like are just like Candy doesn't shut up. And because I hosted so many people,
oh
I just start hosting everyone's
yeah,
shows.
Candy, I have you back on because you make my life so easy. That's honestly, of
I
course.
appreciate that from you because it drives other people nuts.
You have incredible insights and great things to say about the horror movies that we talk about. But on a
Oh, wait
completely
till we talk about Maniac. Wait
on a
till we get in there.
completely
Yeah.
aside note, you make my life so easy when you're on the show.
I like to hear that. That's so awesome.
I'm
Thank
sure
you.
like everyone on the House of Screen podcast is probably cursing me out right now for saying that because
They're used to me being den mother, They're used to it.
anyways,
We all love each other.
yeah, absolutely. Anyways, we are a horror podcast that deep dives into a different topic every single week in our quest to create a leaderboard of the best and worst horror movies of all time. This is episode number 93, fast approaching episode 100, that big milestone. And in today's show, we are talking about the 1980 horror movie Maniac. As we said just before I hit the record button, it's an episode that's many months in the making. It's an episode I know you've been really desperate to get on and talk about. I'm sure we're going to have tons and tons to talk about it. Before we get into any of that, Candy, for anyone who may be listening to this podcast for the first time, who's maybe unaware of the House That Screams Horror podcast, or indeed any of your other projects, give our listeners a quick rundown of your show, where you can be found, and everything else.
Okay, we are the House That Screams Horror Podcast. It's a large group of people. We're all a family. We talk about just about anything you can imagine related to horror, and sometimes not related to horror. God, I don't even know how many episodes we have, like 200 something. I mean, we don't even celebrate them. We're just like, here's another one. Because I'm putting out Return of the Living Dead 2 tonight. Because we just put out 3 earlier I guess this week. But anyway, you can reach us on X. I still call it Twitter, but at house_screams. That's me. I do all of our socials. I'm very active on Instagram at Candy the Final Girl. That's also all show related. I just started a broadcast channel on there yesterday, and we're doing some really fun stuff already, planning some things. So check that out. Also on Threads, but that's connected to Instagram. We are partnered up with pallbearerpress.com. They have the most amazing horror tees and like really cool collectibles. But if you use the code HouseScream10, you get 10% off for our listeners. But I also there's just so many projects and so many things I do. I write for Ghouls Magazine, Final Girl Cosmetics. It's all in my link tree, which is linktree/Candy the Final Girl.
I think I've got it rough reading out our socials and the things that we do. I don't envy you doing that every single week, and guesting on all the podcasts that you guest on.
I get to be at home, so I spend my mornings doing that. It's like 2 to 3 hours every morning, just keeping up with it.
Yeah. The links to all of those, I'll probably post the Linktree link and a couple of those other links as well.
Yeah,
will be in the description for this episode. You can find it. You can find House That Screams across our horror social media channels as well, and of course in our horror network, podcasting network that we're a part of, the F Entertainment Podcast Network, which we are both a part of, as well as some other really great shows out there. The links to the shows are across all of those and will be posted, as I say, with this episode as well. Okay, before we get into the actual discussion, Candy, you are probably relatively familiar with our leaderboard, not intimately, but you've done enough episodes, and I'm sure you've checked enough out that you have a rough idea of what's what. You know, we've got this is our 89th movie that we've actually reviewed on the show. Maybe putting personal preference aside, I know that might be difficult, but how do you feel Maniac's gonna do? Where about in that 89? Bear in mind some of the movies that we have and haven't covered. Where would you predict it would come on our leaderboard?
It's so hard for me to put personal preference aside on this one, but I will say I think that it's like one of those diamonds in the rough. I really think that it's cinema. You know, it's Grindhouse, but it's cinema. And so I think it will rate pretty high.
Okay.
Honestly, because people who watch it tend to really be into it.
Okay. Well, I think as always, it'll probably come down to those pesky critics and whatever they've got to say.
Yeah, like we actually started our Maniac episode with the Gene Siskel review, where he's talking about I was thoroughly grossed out, and they were like showing it on because they had that show, I forget what it was called, Siskel and Ebert did back in the 80s, and they reviewed it, and he left after the famous Tom Savini Disco Boy, you know, where he blew his own head off kind of thing, and they showed it on TV and said, well, don't show this to your children. I'm like, oh god, this is hilarious. So that was our intro to the episode, so it was kind of fun.
Okay, well, with that being said, let's just get into it then. And we are today talking all about Maniac. This movie was released in 1980, was directed by William Lustig, and stars Joe Spinell, Caroline Munro, and Abigail Clayton. The IMDb plot is as follows. A psychopathic man goes on a killing and mutilation spree in New York City. That doesn't really cover. That is just all that's written there on the IMDb plot. It does cover it, but not quite at the same time.
It does, but there's so much more.
Well, I'm gonna
It's
kind of let you just sort of take the floor to begin with. I want to just sort of ask you. So, we've kind of alluded to the fact that you've obviously already mentioned that this is a movie you watch monthly, which is something that I don't think I mean, my favorite, again, I feel I hate saying it, but I don't even watch Halloween monthly, and that's my favorite movie of all time. What is it about Maniac that you just love so much?
Well, the joke is I always say I'm a maniac for Maniac. Um, and it's weird because if you know my taste, which you do, it's like a lot of Romero and things like that, and Giallo films and stuff like that. This isn't something you would think, oh, Candy would be really into this. But this film, it's got what I think it is a more accurate portrayal of a serial killer. It has pathos, it has feelings. It's not some cold-blooded, cool as shit, where you can fantasize. A lot of people like to fantasize and kind of romanticize these serial killers, like, oh, they're ice cold and this and that. I mean, this is a blubbering mess of a man with mother issues and emotions and guilt and it's a lot, and so that I think that draws me in. And we've got Tom Savini, peak Tom Savini gore, and then creating the character of Disco Boy just so he could blow his own head off, like the ultimate fucking, like, effect. It was so cool. And I don't know, and it's just got that kind of grimy New York at the time in the 80s where Henenlotter captured it really well as well, and Bill Lustig was big on that too because he also did like Maniac Cop and shit like that. But it's just, this film is, I don't know, it to me, like, it's just so perfect, and I just like Spinell's portrayal. And I have some things that I want to say about that, but we can get into that later
I've got a
if you
feeling when we
want.
get to the trivia section that I'm just gonna shut up. I think you're gonna blow me out of the water when we get to the trivia
I
section.
don't even have notes. I'm just going
um,
in.
no, well, I just want to piggyback off some of the things you say there because again, doing my research as I do for all the movies that we cover on the show, reading what people had to say about it, and whether that was positive or negative, and one of the things I one sort of sentence that sort of jumped out at me with this is like, it feels, for someone was watching it, it might seem like just another 80s horror slasher, but there's something grotesquely unique about this one in particular. And you talk about those sort of serial killers that get idolized, and our sort of main horror killers, they get idolized, and whether that's a supernatural one or non-supernatural one, whether that's your Mount Rushmore of horror villains, no one's ever going to put Frank Zito on the Mount Rushmore of horror villains. However, there's so much depth to the character, and there's so much depth to this character that actually doesn't really reveal a huge amount to us over the course
No.
of the movie. And that's something that really sort of speaks to Joe Spinell's performance, because he's able to show us the layers of this character, whether that is the blubbering mess that you said, whether that is the psychopath that's scalping these women, the person that's, or on the other scale, whether that's the actual quite sort of suave character that he can sort of show off a little bit later into the movie as well. I think there's more depth to this character than there is to 99% of other horror villains out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, it's mainly Spinell's performance that draws me in, that I just really enjoy, um, kind of going through these emotions with him. you know, like you said, most of these killers in these movies, especially if you're doing like a supernatural thing, or like a Michael Myers or a Jason, they don't even say anything, and they're just kind of like appear and kill people, and that's what you're there for. But Freddy's got his little quips and satire. This this often gets compared to Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. And I always say, now I usually get outnumbered, but I think this is a better film because while I love Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, this one feels a lot more real. This one feels like what it would actually be like. And I feel like the performance is just magnetic in its grotesqueness. And this is a schlubby guy. This is just some average guy you wouldn't look at twice on the street. He blends in.
Yeah.
He's just a regular looking guy, and he can act normal enough for periods of time to get into these situations. And and it has that trope that wasn't completely a trope yet with the mommy issues.
Yeah.
As to why he kills these women, but he doesn't just kill women either.
No, and I
you know
think I think it's really, what really interests me is about as well is, when you read about, sort of real life sort of serial killers, one thing that, you're talking about real life psychopaths and, the psychopath test and all of these things, and one of these things that pops up is the ability to be actually very charismatic. And we see, when he's chatting up and, he's getting a date with the character of Anna, and when they're actually on that date, at times he's being really quite suave and quite, he's doing a really good job. Like you say, he's not someone who you would particularly look twice at. He's not someone who you would deem as conventionally attractive, but he's being really quite out there and doing like a really great job to be on this date with this really attractive girl.
yeah, Carolyn Monroe. Yeah,
yeah, and he's, and I
she
think
was
that,
a Bond girl.
yeah, exactly, and he's really portraying this sort of psychopath, for lack of a better term, that in that sort of depth. It goes back to the layers and the depth of the character, because as you brought up, Jason and Michael, they come on, they don't say anything, and then obviously later on in their franchises you have, the supernatural elements and Jason in space, and that's when it just goes schlocky and crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why we love those franchises. Freddy has,
Because they're just ridiculous.
yeah,
and
it just
fun.
becomes insane. Whereas this actually feels like, and it goes back again to what you're saying, in that comparison between Maniac and Henry, is that this feels real. It actually feels like a real portrayal of a serial killer.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about, a little bit about Joe Spinell.
Mm-hmm.
He was really beloved by, a lot of people in the industry, very close with Sylvester Stallone. Um, he he was just like, I guess, a fun guy. He liked to party. I mean, he was, and he really he actually found a loophole because he was in the Godfather movies, as you
Yeah.
know. Sleeps with the fishes and all that. But he found a way by just showing up on set every day to get these giant residual checks. But he was known as a character actor, like he was in Taxi Driver. He was in a lot of different things,
He had a great
and
career.
but just this character actor, and he wanted to star in a movie, and so Maniac is the movie,
Yeah.
and he gets Bill Lustig on board. Bill Lustig had been a porn director, and Joe Spinell's wife was a porn actress, and he used to go watch her dirty movies and then like critique her performance, which is he was just kind of like a fun guy.
Yeah.
He was really good friends with Carolyn Monroe. They did several movies together. They did the last horror movie, which was after Maniac. They did Star Crash together. They did quite a few movies, and just really good friends. And with Joe Spinell, it was just like Maniac was his thing, and it was such a big deal. And I almost wore my shirt that was the original concept poster,
Yeah.
and it had his face on it. And that was a big deal to him. Like, this was his performance, and honestly, he ate. Like, he left no crumbs. He ate in this role. It was amazing, great performance. But they changed the poster, and then the movie got banned because of people protesting, and Siskel and Ebert like sunk it. There was a big uproar. So he felt like it got stolen from him, his starring role, and that really depressed him.
Yeah.
And I feel bad about that because he didn't live a very he died in the 80s, like late 80s.
Yeah.
um just kind of partied way too hard. um but he was always really depressed that Maniac didn't do what it should have done, and now it gets all these accolades and it's this huge like underground hit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a cult movie, you fucking made it. Especially with horror fans, like you live forever. That movie
Yeah.
is sacred. So this is one of those cult films, but it's like he didn't get to see that. He thought it was a failure until the day he died.
Yeah.
And it wasn't his big starring role.
It is like you say, I feel like, again, talking in sort of more general terms, horror is that sort of genre more than possibly any other, where, if you make it as a cult movie, and the horror fandom is not a small community. This is a worldwide community, and if you make it as to cult status within the horror movie, the horror fandom and the horror society, you've really done something special, and something that not a lot of people can do. You can release a big blockbuster and have it be massively successful, make you absolute shit tons of money, and not be as beloved as someone who has made a low budget cult horror movie.
Well, and a good example of that is John Carpenter. John Carpenter was one of those ones that was always ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
So every single one of his movies tanked,
Yeah.
bombed.
Yeah.
And now they are so beloved, and he is so burnt out from making these amazing fucking movies that when you meet him at cons or you get to meet him somewhere, he won't even talk about them.
Yeah.
He wants to talk about video games and sports.
Which,
like,
fair enough,
done. Yeah, he's burnt out. And Romero, before he died, he was getting to be the same way.
Yeah.
Like, because being ahead of the curve and making these films that, like, almost every Carpenter film is a fucking cult film, like, but they all failed. And Romero, he had some success as well, but a lot of them, like Day of the Dead, that was a failure.
Mm-hmm.
It failed and it bombed, and now it's like a cult film. If you're a cult film, like you usually don't get to live to see its legacy, or if you do, you're so just like, finally. But now it's like, I'm so bitter about it.
You're so bitter, or you're at that stage of life where you maybe just can't enjoy it the same way. Like you say, Joe Spinell died in 1989, I want to say, and he was
Yes.
early 50s, I think, when he died. He wasn't.
Yeah, his mother, he had lived with his mother the whole time.
Yeah.
And his mother and him were very close. She's in the last horror movie, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But when she died, it just like he died right after.
Yeah.
Because he was, so in real life, he was very close to his mother.
Yeah.
And he was integral to the story of Maniac, the concept and creation of some of the kills and the character. So, I wonder, how much influence.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He is credited as one of the writers of the movie. So, it's not a case of, just an actor coming up and portraying and taking personal effects. He was so influential in the whole creation process of this film. And
this was his baby.
Yeah, and like, again, like, just to sort of flesh out a couple of things there. You go back to his career and you look at some of the big titles on his career. It is a blockbuster. The first two Godfather movies, the Godfather is, in fact, the first. I think he's uncredited in it, but it's the first thing that appears on his actual filmography. It's the first movie he was in, was The Godfather. That's not a bad place.
And he got like checks the rest of his life,
Yeah.
huge residuals, because he found a loophole.
That's not a bad place, though, to start off your career.
Right.
The Godfather. Like you said, you mentioned Taxi Driver. I think he was in the first two Rocky movies. These are some of the biggest movies, the most famous movies of all time, not just in horror, but just in film in general. He had this amazing career, and like you say, it does almost, it pulls on my heartstrings as well to think, right, this was his sort of opportunity to be that leading man. And this was his baby, and he poured his heart and soul into it, and he was drawing from all his personal experience and drawing from everything to really make this movie. And he's made something that is actually, I think, really special. But he never got to see
Mm-hmm.
that, and that's ultimately, heartbreaking.
It's a bummer. It
So
sucks.
you got to feel for him, but hopefully, I mean, I love this movie, but you love this movie, and I know we both know that there's a huge
Yes, I do.
community of people out there who love this movie. So you never know. Welcome on
I
into.
have this special edition Blu-ray from Blue Underground, which is Bill Lustig's company, who was the director. And it has 2 discs, and the second disc has what's a little documentary called The Joe Spinell Story. I highly recommend it. The Blue Underground, if you go to blueunderground.com, um, you can buy that, and it's inexpensive, very nice Blu-ray set. It has some amazing features. If you are a fan of Maniac, like I suggest getting that one
Yeah,
because you're going to find out a lot of this story, and it will tug at your heartstrings.
yeah,
It definitely will.
absolutely. Um, welcome on into the chat room to Boomer, who's just dropped into the chat
Hey,
room,
Boomer.
talking about another terrible film. I see. He qualifies that by
Oh,
he
Boomer.
says he's only kidding though. He says just before you reach through the
No.
screen. But let's talk about some of the details in this movie. We've talked about Joe Spinell. We've talked about sort of briefly about the character. One of the things I really love about this movie is there is no there's no hiding of anything. There is a kill in this movie within the first 90 seconds. There's 2 kills in the opening scene of this movie. You get that opening scene on the beat, on the sand, very reminiscent of Jaws. You get that
Yes.
sort of opening kills, and it just immediately tells you exactly what kind of film we're gonna get. This is a film that doesn't pull its punches, but
Yeah, I mean, it has a garroting like right there at the
yeah,
beginning, like it is vicious.
yeah. But I think for me as well is like it immediately tells us, right, that this killer that we're dealing with, if I'm watching this for the very first time, this killer that we're dealing with, this is a strong, powerful guy. This is a guy who's not afraid to get dirty to do his kills. So it tells me right from the beginning, right, this is a guy who's not going to fuck about.
Right.
So I think that's
I like that. I
okay.
like that we get that. And then, it cuts immediately to him waking up screaming and crying about
Mm-hmm.
this kill that, this double murder he did,
Yeah.
because he's remembering and he feels guilt and he's crying and he's in his kind of kitty pajamas almost because he's got kind of this shrine to his mother in this little shitty apartment he lives in this shitty place in New York, bad neighborhood. And he's got a shrine to his mother who we find out abused him,
Mm-hmm.
not through telling, but showing.
Yeah.
And it's not even really in depth. It's just there. Like it's just like a natural progression, but he's very childlike and he's very, you know, the whole famous poster, I warned you not to go out tonight. That's about his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he loved his mother, he was afraid of his mother. I mean, this is all inferred. You just pick it up. It's not fed to you like you're an idiot. It's there, but I just love that, we see the murders and then he immediately, sits up in bed screaming and crying about it because he
Yeah.
feels so bad.
Yeah, no, the 100%. This again, 100% is one of the reasons why I love this movie so much. Is that this movie does not treat you, the viewer, like an idiot. You know, so many movies go with the tell not show the way of giving people exposition in a film, whereas this movie does the opposite and shows you, not tells you, lets you come to your own conclusions, lets you get there in your own time, and that to me just
And that's a
shows.
good thing. And because I'm a writer,
Mm-hmm.
I write fiction. I do some journalism, but I'm a fiction writer, and it's always show don't tell.
Yeah,
And if you can pull that off either in a movie, especially in a movie,
yeah,
um a script, a book, you're doing it right.
yeah,
It feels natural. You're not being spoon fed.
yeah. And
You
again,
get to think about it.
it's not even a case of like explicitly showing us exposition as well. We're drawing conclusions here based on facial expressions that are getting pulled, and again, that goes back to sort of Joe Spinell's performance because you know I think it's actually quite easy to maybe underestimate the level of performance that he actually gives in this movie. But when you sit down and you rewatch it and you analyze it and you look at it and you actually realize just how incredible a job he does at those little facials, and for example, one of those images that keeps popping up on the actual screen is that one where he's strangling the prostitute to death, and he's just got this crazed look on his
Like
face.
sweaty
Yeah,
grimace on
yeah.
his face.
And he's telling you so much and giving so much emotion with that one look in that one scene, and it's something that so few people are actually able to do.
Right. And he's very good at conveying with body language, and I have a background in acting,
Mm-hmm.
and especially like in stage acting. I mean, you have to absolutely play to the back of the theater,
Yeah,
and he's doing that just with his facial expressions and his body language, and just in that moment when he's choking that prostitute, um we get that one little clip, like it's such a brief flash of his mother,
yeah,
who we know it's his mother just because we saw the little shrine of her, and you have to kind of put that together, but it's like that quick flash of it, like, so that's how it's just kind of slowly getting into your bloodstream, like, I'm getting this is why he's doing it,
mm-hmm.
because everybody who likes true crime and stuff, they're like, well, I want to know the psychology, I want to know why he does it. Well, it doesn't exactly tell you, but it does. You just have to think about it, and it's always better on a rewatch too.
Yeah. I
You
think
pick up on more
I
things.
think as well, going on that scene in particular as well. That scene drags on and on. Him actually strangling her actually lasts such a long time as well, which for me
And I
adds.
love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It completely adds to the realism for me, because you'll know yourself, how many times does someone get strangled within 2 seconds in a horror movie and they're dead, so it adds to the realism factor of it as well anyway. But not only that, it just adds to that sort of uncomfortable factor for us as well as viewers. We're literally watching this guy strangling this woman to death, and we understand as well, because there's that one brief scene, just before he hires her, where she's telling another prostitute, I haven't made my rent yet, so she, and a simple thing
I
like
need
that.
like one more trick or
Yeah,
something.
and a
Yeah.
simple thing like that tells us, that this is again that, and is the case for a lot of sex workers on the streets as well. It's a case of doing it out of desperation. Doing it because they don't really have another choice, and and it just, I think, again, I'm gonna keep repeating it as they go on. It's so layered in that way, and it makes the scene so effective.
And I was just commenting because, of course, I was watching it last night, and and my son, he's into horror movies. Really, my whole family, all my kids, but excuse me, I'm getting a cold. Both my kids and my husband, yeah, they're used to me watching Maniac. But I was like, I like the strangulation scene because in most, now, this is a fucked up thing to say, I guess, out of context, but in context it makes sense. But sorry,
Okay.
most strangulation scenes in like horror movies, they're over pretty quick.
Yeah.
But when you're actually going to strangle somebody, you got to be, crushing the larynx. It takes a while. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually, and you got to be really strong. And so it shows the actual struggle that makes it feel more real,
Yeah.
because it's not, it does drag on, because a strangulation does drag on for a minute.
Yeah.
It's not a quick little thing like they show in some other films. It gives that realism. We get those great facial expressions, and her, just slowly losing, her breath. We're watching this whole thing happen, and you feel like, oh my God, I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm really there.
And then just when you think it's over, and she either dies or loses consciousness, it then comes the scalping, and it just takes a scene that was so incredibly uncomfortable anyway just to watch, and just takes it all the way to 11, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The scalpings, and I have this thing, and it's funny, so I'm about to turn this around for a minute. I'm terrified of mannequins. I actually was gonna almost wear my shirt, because Fright Rags does these in April. They do these parody shirts, and I have one that says Maniacin. So like instead of mannequin, it's like Joe Spinell, and he has all the maniacs with the scalps nailed to the tops of their heads around him on the motorcycle, sort of like, the play on that Andrew McCarthy movie.
Yeah.
But I'm terrified of mannequins because when I was a kid, my uncle, who liked to prank me all the time, told me mannequins were dead people. So I would be afraid to go to department stores. And so, I mean, obviously, I know that that's not true, but they've always creeped me right the fuck out. And so we've got, the whole mannequin thing. And then, we see him like, nailing on the hair, and he's brushing the hair. And don't you want to look pretty for me? Like, that's what's on this shirt. Um, if my background will cooperate.
Yeah.
It's like a stylized version of him doing that. And I like, because he has those kind of like glittery purple sunglasses on, and he's like looking a little like, suave for the
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
Hairbrush neatly, like, oh, but your hair's so pretty. And, it's like, but the mannequins, like, oh, they fucking freak me out. Not just in this movie, but in general. But it's used to great effect here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then of course, later on, and we'll get to it when we get there. You've got the final scene, where the mannequins come to life, and if for someone who's maybe got a fear of mannequins, I'm sure that's just a fear being realized. Quick catch up, sorry, in the chat room. I know you've checked it out as well, Candy. Boomers in there saying this is a terrible date movie. No one is parking after watching this. Yeah, fair enough. Because I think we're gonna come on to one of those scenes in just a moment, and he think the prostitutes prefer the term independent contractors as well. So yeah, I wanted next thing I want to sort of move on to. We've already sort of we've kind of mentioned him already and the character that he creates, because and I know this is someone who you are just a massive fan of in terms of the work that they do.
Oh, absolutely, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, Tom Savini. I mean, is there anyone out there who does what Tom Savini does better?
No. Not even to this day.
It's
although I'm a fan of Screaming Mad George, but that's a different monster there.
Yeah.
Like the society shunt scene is up there for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Screaming Mad George is pretty good.
Well, and pulling at Screaming into the 21st century, I will say that Damien Leone is doing some great stuff with the Terrifier franchise, effects wise.
Yeah, I'm glad that Terrifier is doing what it's doing, and I met Damien Leone, and nice guy, and we talked about movies. I met him at Days of the Dead earlier this year, but I like what he's doing because he's bringing it back.
Yeah.
He's bringing back all the shit that people, especially in like my generation, which is a Zennial, which is sort of like late Gen X, early millennial. We grew up watching like these splatter fests.
Yeah.
And just like, he's bringing that back, and I am so fucking happy. I've been waiting a goddamn long time for that.
But some of the great things I'm seeing as well, obviously, just to go on a little tangent for a minute, because I'll take any opportunity to talk about the Terrifier franchise. Terrifier 2.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Terrifier 2 was such a huge success, but what one thing I will say is, like, there are instances out there, hopefully not completely though, of history just repeating itself a little bit, because I don't know if you've seen across social media as well the controversy about the Terrifier 3 trailer that dropped and got leaked, about the potential of a child being killed in the movie, and there just seems to be so much controversy about it, like we've never seen a child being killed in a horror movie before.
But see, we're coming out of this whole, when the 90s came along, they started toning down things in movies, because in the 80s, movies were getting shut down, like Maniac, okay, and that doesn't even have children being killed. Thank you very much. Sean's dad just brought me something really cool that I have to show on camera, but in the 80s, it was nothing. But I mean, still, there were the parents that were mad, and they would shut it down, even though we would all find a way to watch it. And it's like he's bringing that back,
Yeah.
and we need that. We
Yeah.
need a fucking injection.
Yeah. And again, and it goes back to what Wren said on the show, back when because he was on our show for our episode on Terrifier, the first movie, and you know, he's not he's not a fan. He's not a fan of the franchise in the slightest. But you know, it's a case of being able to respect what the creators are doing, you know, and being able to bring it into a modern audience. Like you say, we have been waiting for so long. You know, I am a millennial. I'm a full millennial for my sins. And I remember growing up in the late 90s and the early noughties and having this really sort of toned down version of horror movies. Now, at the same time, I was still watching all that stuff from the 70s and all the great movies that were coming out in that came out in the 80s, and that's why my love of horror came from. It certainly didn't come from the pieces of crap that was coming out, you know, in the late 90s and the early noughties. Don't get me wrong, obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but in general, you know, horror was just in such a poor place at that time, you know. And again, it's something that I've said many times before. I really feel like we're going back through a golden era of horror. You know, I think the last 7 or 8 years of horror movies have just been incredible.
Yeah, no, I'm not into like the Blumhouse. Like Blumhouse is kind of our big budget.
Yeah.
Not, you know, for the people who are like, oh honey, let's go see a scary movie. It's October, you know.
Yeah.
They're casual watchers, which I'm not trying to shit on them. That's cool. But those movies are for them.
Yeah.
Blumhouse stuff, except for like the Black Phone or something, is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
But A24 is bringing in this emotional horror that like stuff like we got in the 70s, like Don't Look Now with Donald Sutherland, and you know, some of the moodier like 60s and 70s, you know, emotional and scary. So we got, you know, great independent shit and lower budget shit, but amazing coming from that. And then we're getting our Splatterfest back, and it's like it's the golden age. I'm here to see it again because I was there, you know, in the 80s for this shit, and now I'm getting to do it again.
Yeah,
and it's just it's so fucking exciting.
And this time, you know, some of these things are getting wider cinema releases as well. Again, to take that back to Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2 didn't get a cinema release here in the UK. I'm not sure how many countries around the world it did get a cinema release to. And I remember in its initial run...
We got it.
And in its initial run in the States, it was very, very limited number of theatres that got it. And I remember the sort of 2 or 3 months after it came out, and every single week it was the little train that could. It just kept going and kept going, and every single week it was in more theaters and more theaters and more theaters, and it was just incredible. And yeah, like I said, as I was saying, as Ren says, he's not a fan of that, but you know, movies that do that can lead to us getting such great independent things that are away from the likes of Blumhouse. Now, I'm maybe slightly less on the Blumhouse hate train, but a lot of their movies are very much more your sort of mainstream, traditional scare fests, if you will, for lack of a better
I mean,
term.
they're okay, but they don't impress me much.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
because they're playing for the masses.
Not what I'm looking for.
You know, but movies like Terrifier 2 are not playing for the masses, and the fact that was so successful, you know, leads to things like Ren brought up Skinamarink. You know, and movies like that simply being able to be released and you know, being seen by as many eyes as it was seen as. So, you know, these movies coming out, even though, you know, we're talking about Maniac and how it was sort of shut down and it was banned and all of these things, you know, can still have such a huge impact and a huge influence on the genre in total.
Yeah. I'm just so excited. I can't wait to see what's coming next.
I know.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I just want it to keep on going. I mean, listen, there's gonna come a point where this second golden era or third golden era or however you want to call it, you know, it will come to an end at some point. But
let's enjoy that fucking ride.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just go. Anyways, you know, and not unlike me and you, Candy, to go off on a massive 15-minute long tangent.
Oh, you know me.
We have got so much to say about Maniac, and we spend 15 minutes not even talking about the movie. I want to go off on a ever such a slightly less irrelevant tangent, because I think Boomer brought it up in the chat as well, and a few people brought it up to me when I was asking for opinions. This movie has, of course, got a remake with Elijah Wood playing our main character. How did you feel about that one?
I thought it was creative. I thought that they were smart to not try to do like a shot for shot. I thought they made some interesting creative choices. I like it. Um, and it has its own merits, but nothing can touch the original for me. Um, so it's like one of those like one and done for me. Like I'm glad it exists, it's cool, and maybe it got some people to go back and go, oh, there's an original version,
Yeah.
or at least put the word out there. But for me, like it doesn't have the same what I'm looking for that I get in the original.
It doesn't have the same shock factor, does it? That the original one does. It doesn't.
No.
It definitely is its own thing. It's very odd. I find it to be this like really sort of odd occasion. We talk about remakes all the time. I'm sure I've talked about remakes on your show at times, and various episodes. We talk about remakes, and what's like the criteria of a remake to be good, and for a remake to be successful, and all of these things. It does kind
And
of
that's like a never ending discussion,
Yeah.
really.
But Maniac, the remake, kind of just feels like it's in its own sort of category where I think it's pretty widely accepted as a good film. I've not come across
I mean,
many.
I haven't heard anything bad about it. I
Yeah.
mean, most people have really enjoyed it. Um, the POV stuff, like it kind of, all I can do it because I'm such a big fan of the original is just think of like I think like, oh, that's cool. And then I start thinking about the original Maniac.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad it got remade. I just,
Yeah.
it's not in the format that I
Yeah.
like this movie.
Yeah, of course.
I think if it was something else, like maybe in the same vein, and they did that, I probably would watch it more or like it a little bit more. I don't hate it. I just,
Yeah,
I didn't feel like it needed to be remade.
No, but like I say, it does sort of sometimes, like, pretty, you talk about all of your sort of major remakes, whether that be, uh, The Thing, or Halloween, or, Nightmare on Elm Street, or Friday the 13th, or, whichever one, like, it's usually, obviously not, again, exceptions to the rule. The Maniac, I think, is definitely the exception to the rule. It's usually cut or dry. This movie is either great or it's absolute dog shit in the eyes of the horror community, But
I've heard both opinions.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, I feel like it's a really competently made movie. It's a really good movie. I think Elijah Wood does a really good job. I'm glad that they made some different creative choices, but it's also a movie that has just kind of been forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like it only comes up if you're talking about the original Maniac, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I really like the remake too," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah,
yeah."
I mean, that's
like
fair."
so
But you never hear anybody bring it up on its own.
Yeah, like I watched the remake after rewatching the original for this podcast because I remember watching it and I remember enjoying it, but I don't remember too much about it. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go back and check it out. You're right. It's one of those ones that comes up when you think about the original. But I just wanted to sort of get that out there because I really feel like the remake is kind of in this like unique position amongst remakes where it doesn't.
I mean, it's good, but it's like, like I just never see, being in the horror community and like being on Twitter or I don't know, X, whatever.
We'll go with Twitter.
And you see people post. Yeah, it's still Twitter to me, but it's like when you see people post, what do you think of this movie, or I like this movie, or I'm watching this movie. You never see anybody post like I'm watching the Maniac remake.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I'm watching the House of Wax remake or Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, whichever remake of that you want to pick, which is not the Netflix one, please. But that was straight ass. But it's just nobody's ever just like, Yeah, I'm watching the Maniac remake. It's like when you run into just to fans of Maniac, though, that like me, they're the maniacs for Maniac. Um, yeah, they're all about Joe Spinell. They'll just go on, and I'm just like, I am here for this. And sometimes it's me doing it. Often it's me doing it.
Right, okay,
Actually,
let's just
I
quick.
post about it way too much on our Twitter.
Boomer's in the chat just saying the music in the remake's incredible. He's glad Elijah Wood got to be in it because of how much he loves the original and horror in general, which is a good point. Elijah Wood is.
Yeah, I
Oh,
love.
yeah, Elijah Wood
I mean, I love
is
Elijah Wood. I just showed my son Ash Mandy for the
mhm.
first time, and Elijah Wood was the producer on that.
Yeah,
He is a big horror fan, and I love that about him.
yeah, and I
I
think
really
you
do.
can see that in a lot of the performances that he does do in horror movies. Not a horror movie,
Yeah.
but just before I came on this chat to talk to you, I was in the middle of watching Lord of the Rings: Two Towers because it's that time of year, so Elijah Wood's just like on the brain. Boomer also says there's some
Yeah,
people who
and that's okay.
there's some people who like the Netflix one. I'm assuming, yeah, you're just replying to that. They're wrong. And can I just
Yeah, I
say,
was like, they're wrong.
they're absolutely wrong.
I don't know how they can like it. I mean, in this day and age, how you can do bad CGI that looks terrible now, because usually it takes a couple of years for CGI to look really, really bad.
Yeah.
No, it looks bad now.
Okay, let's talk.
It was just not good. And they took out Sally Hardesty like a fucking bitch. Like she didn't. Come on, man.
They
Really?
very much Jamie Lee Curtis her, and then didn't Jamie Lee Curtis her at the same
And
time.
then didn't Jamie Lee Curtis her at all after that. Like they
uh,
were trying to do that, and then they failed.
yeah,
They failed.
yeah, not a good
They
film.
failed me.
Anyways, talking of
Yeah, it
effects,
was bad.
let's talk about Disco Boy
I
scene.
wanted to
Oh,
show
let's go for it.
my
Yes.
amazing. If my background will cooperate. Hold on, let me find the sweet spot. No, I'm just weird. All right.
There we go. There we
This
go.
is from Paul Bear Press. They only made 100 of them. God fucking damn it. There we go. Come on. Work with me. I'm gonna turn this background off. I can't live like this.
You also posted it to our social media as well. It is on. It's on one of the threads. I think it's on one of the threads that we posted asking about people's opinions of this film. So if you want to get a closer look at it, go check out that thread on our social media as well. Whilst Candy's trying to get that, but we're talking about obviously the Disco Boy scene. I'm sorry. It's just so funny.
why I don't even know how to turn my background off now. Jesus Christ.
There we go. There we go.
Sort of.
No, you're just like there's just no focus now.
It's all right. Hold on. Give me one more second. I'm gonna try this.
There we go.
Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, so this is they only made 100, and we got cool Tom Savini there, and you can see I have 18. Hold on, of 100.
Yes.
It was $125 because it's very limited. It's
Yeah.
extremely detailed. Like it is intensely detailed. Like it's
Yeah.
an actual figure. His clothes are real and everything. Christian, who does the art for Paul Bear Press, is amazing. But I immediately went over to Tom Savini and had him sign it. So this thing I'm holding is probably worth about like $800. It's one of my
It's almost one of a kind.
the box work is amazing. Yeah, it's just, and we've got a scalping there. We've got the famous
that's
scene.
so
So anyway, that's one of my favorite pieces of my collection, and I have a Night Living Dead lunchbox with a lot of the original members' handwriting, like signatures on it. But anyway, I love that scene, and what's really cool about this scene, with Disco Boy and why Disco Boy was created, and I just think it's hilarious that he's Disco Boy because I mean, it's 1980. Disco was the biggest thing in the world, and so obviously they were at a disco and they go to make out, and that's when Savini gets this idea. I want to blow my own head off, and he had this head that he called Boris.
Yeah.
And if you read, he has a really great book called Grand Illusions. Savini does, where it talks about how he did effects for so many of his movies.
Mm-hmm.
and the head Boris is the exact same head they blew up in that scene in Dawn of the Dead,
Yeah.
where they kick open the door and boom, it blows up. So this was Boris's last hurrah in this movie, because Dawn of the Dead's 1978, and he's like, I'm gonna blow my own head off though, and he has a funny story about it because if you look at Tom Savini really closely, and that his nose looks different because he said he had an ethnic hump in it, and he had his nose job done, and he was actually kind of hooking up with the girl that was in the car with him, making out with him, and when he said he recovered from his nose job at her apartment, so it was during this film
Yeah.
that he had his nose job where he got that hump removed, and I'm like, but I liked your original nose, Tom. It was I like an ethnic hump. I got a big old schnoz myself. I have
I
an
think
ethnic
I'm a
hump.
member of the big the rather large nose community as well. And what's
I've grown into it.
a couple of things I love about this scene as well. Like, not obviously, it's always such a blast as soon as you see Tom Savini on your screen. Anyway, you know you're going to be in for just some moments of fun. I love the fact that it's actually Tom Savini who blows up the head as well. It's not Joe
Yeah,
Spinell.
he actually, and the thing is that you can get arrested for shooting a gun,
Mm-hmm.
that and they had this big double barrel shotgun, and so they only had one chance to get that shot, and he's like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna pull the trigger, so he's technically blowing his own head off.
Yeah.
So not only was he having fun with the effect of like, I'm gonna kill myself, I'm gonna do the ultimate effect, I'm gonna sculpt myself and I'm gonna do this, but he pulled the fucking trigger, and then they immediately had to throw the gun, and then that was the end of Boris, and dump the car in the fucking river
Well, I mean,
before they got
they
arrested.
didn't have they didn't actually have permission to film a lot of the stuff that they were
They
filming.
did not, because this is Bill Lustig's first non-porn film,
Yeah,
and it's tiny budget.
yeah. So they were filming and then having to like run away essentially from their own sets. Before the police came, and like you say, they were doing things like shooting double-barreled shotguns and blowing up, blowing heads up and everything. So it was definitely a bit of a risky, a risky shoot, if you will. What I love as well, going into later in the film, I'm not 100% sure if this is true. You'll probably be able to tell me if it is or isn't. There's a scene towards the end when the mannequins come alive where one of them is headless, and that's this, I believe, the same prosthetic as they used for Pamela Voorhees in Friday the 13th.
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Okay. I read that and I wasn't 100% sure if that was true. So,
Because I mean, 1980 was a huge fucking year for Savini. That's when he is really coming in hot. I mean, after Dawn of the Dead, because I mean, obviously we know his legacy. He was supposed to do the effects in the original Night of the Living Dead, ended up going to Vietnam and becoming a photographer.
mhm.
And he had to photograph all the corpses, and so that's how his effects got so good. He comes back, he does Dawn of the Dead. Everybody wants him for everything,
Yeah.
and of course, he mostly worked with Romero, but he did the first Friday 13th, which is, the effects are amazing.
Yeah.
And then right after that he did Maniac. So 1980 was a huge year for him.
Yeah, and like he's still doing incredible stuff to this day as well. He's in there. I think was
Being a demigod.
yeah. I think his most recent movie that he worked on that's been released was Black Phone. I think he was part of that,
Yes.
and he's got again a few more projects that's coming out in the course of the next couple of years as well. We talked about Joe
And he's
Spinell.
got all his students at his school, because he teaches effects
Yeah.
now. And Gregory Nicotero is the big guy. I always call him Gregory because that's how he's billed in Day of the Dead. He was Tom Savini was his mentor.
Yeah.
So it's like, so Gregory Nicotero is like the big guy on effects now, but that all, K and B is was formed, with the N being Nicotero. And they were kind of the big deal in the 90s when Savini was doing more directing and stuff like that.
Well, I mean,
So
you're probably hard pressed, sorry, to find anyone who works in special effects or makeup effects or CGI or anything like, whether that's horror or not. You'll probably find anyone in the industry who doesn't credit Tom Savini as being their influence in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and then when you go past Savini, I mean, it was you know, Rick Baker, Stan Winston, people like that. So they influence him. But Savini, as far as modern horror, I mean, he's the effect god.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
100%.
that, he's the guy, and then it all branches out.
Yeah, 100%. It's not even close, is it? Boomer
Now,
in the
and when you watch the last drive-in version of Maniac, I think they did it in season two. Joe Bob did it, and Savini was a guest.
Mhm.
And when they were sitting around coming up with the kills, obviously Spinell was there because this is his baby. And Savini actually, for all the shit, I mean, he blows his own fucking head off and he's done all these crazy, like the garroting and all these crazy, effects that he's done, or and the arrow through the throat with Kevin Bacon
Mhm.
and Friday 13th. Like, he's not afraid to do shit. But at one point, Spinell brought up biting something off of a woman and a very intimate place. And, and, and I don't mean a nipple even. He was like, and he said, I actually had to go, Joe, you can't bite that off a woman. What am I going to do? Raid the craft services table for clams? I mean, like, how are we going to, why would you even? He said he had to put the kibosh on that. And that's the only time he's ever had to turn down an effect. Like, no, I'm not doing that. I will not do that.
You know you've really hit upon something when Tom Savini's telling you, no, I
When Tom
can't do
Savini says, holy shit, dude.
that.
Fanilla's just having like a crazy time with this,
Yeah.
like having fun. Like, what's the craziest shit we can do? Well, we can't do that.
Uh,
I cringe thinking about it. How I imagine men feel when they see other men get kicked in the balls. Like, ooh,
is
ooh,
that I think that could possibly be the we finally found what the equivalent version is.
yeah, biting that off a woman. Like, oh dear God.
Boomer says
Yeah, I'm just yeah.
Tom Savini's most famous role may be Lost Boys: The Tribe. Boomer's in a playful mood today.
I guess so. Yeah, Boomer's full spunk today. Wait, that sounded wrong. That's not what I meant. But my grandma would just say that when somebody's being peppy. But
yeah,
I realized that sounded dirty. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
I mean, that's just a standard Sunday for Boomer anyway. So, anyways, we'll move on because at this point in the movie, we've already talked about so many of these scenes in depth. We've talked about Joe Spinell and his character. We've talked about Tom Savini and his effects and things, and we're I don't even think we're halfway through the movie yet. At this
Oh
point,
no, we're
there's
not.
so
We're
much
not.
that's going on. I want to talk about the scene where he stalks the nurse throughout the subway station, because there's something.
Oh my God.
I still don't know if I even know what it is. There's just something about that scene that I find so unsettling. We've seen people being stalked through subways before. We've seen horror movies that take you to a public bathroom, and there's the we think they're gone, and it doesn't necessarily show us something that we've not seen before. But there's just I don't know whether it's the griminess of it. I don't know whether it's the performances from our actors. There's something about this
I think it's
particular
all of
scene.
it.
It's
And and
so
and I think
unsettling.
as a woman, in particular as a woman, because we always have to watch out for ourselves. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
famously worked at video stores, and on weekends we would close at like 1, and I wouldn't get to my car until about 2. And just walking out into the parking lot, because we couldn't park up front, employees
Yeah.
made to park out back. I had to make sure I had like a box cutter or something on me. Like, you have to be careful as a woman. And so this is like, such a deep fear for women in general. And this is such a dangerous time in New York before they started cleaning up some of the areas. Um, you know, um, and some of these great grindhouse films really captured that part of New York, that really grimy, seedy thing. And being in a subway that late at night because nurses were at crazy hours, and being that afraid, like I was afraid for her, but I knew it was going to happen. And it's just so violating, it's so violent, it's so just almost like depressing in its viciousness.
Yeah, it is. It could just completely sucks you into the atmosphere of the surroundings that's going on. and it almost pulls you down to the that level, doesn't it? It just seems to have this sort of weird ability to be able to do that, like, you know, that, and that's the sort of thing that I think, you know, most horror movies out there, they aspire to be, you know, they aspire to pull their viewers in to get to that sort of level of engagement, and so few are able to do it. But this movie just, again, you know, to go back to, you know, I find it
If
really
you can give
difficult.
me anxiety without a jump scare, you're doing it right.
Yeah, yeah, oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah, and you know, that's so many modern movies, you know, like you say, just rely on that jump scare
It's kind of
factor,
lazy.
you know, and this is able to do it without it. So I do enjoy, there is there's a continuity error that I always see. It really bugs the fuck out of me in this scene though, because there's the scene where the train is pulling away from the station. And if you look through the train windows, there is about 20 people on the platform. And people just
Yeah.
milling about. And then it cuts to the nurse, and there's no one there. And it's the one part of the movie that I'm always like, ah! Like, you know, that.
Yeah. And it's because they didn't have a permit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they
Oh,
couldn't close off
100%.
the set.
So yeah, but that again, just yet another scene, you know, going back to the Disco Boy scene, you know, as well, you know, we obviously talked about, you know, the head being blown up and how iconic and famous that is, but there is that moment in those scenes as well where, you know, they're getting it on in the back seat, but he's just peering through that window. And again, you know, I know, obviously I can't speak to it from a female perspective, but, you know, she sees him, and, you know, she's completely freaked out, and she wants to go home. And then, you know, Tom Disco Boy is, you know, he's just wanting to get it on in the back seat. You know, there is, it's there as well. It's not just in this subway bathroom scene. It's there throughout.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it with most of his character, his victims being women because of the whole, mommy issues. I say in quotes for listeners. Um, it seems like, because we have this sort of childlike serial killer, he seems to be curious about sex, but like going back to like the first, when he kills that prostitute, the first like really in-depth kill, um she wants to take her clothes off. He's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
And he kisses her, but then he gets weirded out and chokes her.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there was sexual abuse. Maybe, we don't really know. Or, maybe he just stayed in this childlike state because of physical abuse from his mother.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know, but it seems like, you know, he wants them to be pretty and he wants to keep them forever, but it's not a sexual thing at all.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
wants to cuddle. He puts the scalps on these mannequins and sleeps with them at night. He puts
Yeah.
them in clothes and hugs them. And I don't want you to ever leave me. I don't, I love you and
Yeah.
you're so pretty in your mind, but there's nothing sexual about it.
It's a companionship thing that you know, he is looking for. He is looking for someone there to not abuse him in the way he was when he was brought up. And, you know, like you say, it isn't
And
it,
abandonment issues.
yeah, of course. And, you know, it isn't a sexual thing, and we see that in those scenes. You know, you can see that up to a point he knows what he's doing, because initially when, you know, in that prostitute sheet scene, you know, he you know, they're starting, you know, he knows what's going on, he knows what's supposed to happen. um but like you say, then gets weirded out by it. You know, he's the, you know, peeping in on the folks on the back seat as well. And then again, you know, going to it, because I think it's probably the next scene coming up, we have this sort of date scene that he has with Anna, Caroline Monroe, where he is incredibly charming. And, you know, he's very suave, and, you know, he almost has that like Italian charm as well,
And
doesn't
he's
he?
got like a sense of humor and like,
Yeah.
she's because you're like, she's so hot. Why would he date him? Why would she date him? And you hear that in the real world, like, why is that hot chick with that guy? Personally, for me, what I look for when in a man, now in a woman, I'm looking for something different. But like in a man, I want I want a sense of humor.
Yeah.
I want somebody who can make me laugh
Mhm.
because I've been married a long time and I have kids. And at the end of the day, when everything else fails, if you can make me laugh, that's going to keep things going. That's going to keep that relationship alive. And it doesn't have to be, I don't have to be with somebody insanely hot. And I don't, I wouldn't want somebody to be with me because they think just because I'm attractive or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm attractive, but just maybe they thought that I wouldn't want to be with them
Yeah.
because I want to be liked for my personality. And personality is what gets me. Like, he's a funny guy, so it's like it is very actually something that could really happen. She's
Yeah.
attracted to somebody who's making her laugh and appreciating her work as a photographer, and asking about her day, and taking her to movies, and just doing fun things.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. It doesn't have to be about sex or how hot somebody is.
Yeah, 100%. And this things that all still apply today in 2023. You know, these are all things that still apply today when people are out there dating and they're constantly, especially when it comes to men as well, I think, where, there's just this sort of thing where men are generally interested in one thing and one thing only, and but like you say, being attractive or being insanely hot or anything, and it's not a personality trait. It's not who someone is. It's a physical attribute that someone has. Your personality
But I
is,
think that's what leads to a lot of divorce. I mean,
yeah.
divorce is, it's literally 50-50 chance that you might get divorced.
Hmm.
But a lot of those marriages that fail and relationships that fail is they get with somebody they're attracted to. They're probably having really good sex, but there's nothing more to it.
Yeah,
And
and
that's why it fails, because while this person's hot and you're having great sex, you probably think they're annoying. You don't care about their interests. They don't
mhm.
care about yours,
I
and and you have nothing else.
I have been in those relationships. I have absolutely been in those
Me too.
relationships, and it's not even sometimes a case that you're with someone because they're incredibly attractive, or like you say the sex is really good or something. Sometimes there was times previously where I'd sit and I'd think to the person, I was like, the person that I'm with, you're not even like a good person. You're not a nice person. You don't have
Right.
nice personality traits, but I've been with you for X amount of time because of that physical attractiveness. And like you say,
Exactly.
being funny, being kind, showing an interest, that just goes so much further than being attractive could ever possibly be. And you
And
know,
as somebody who, I had a young practice marriage. I mean, I have commitment issues just because I was anti-marriage. I got married in my late 20s, very briefly, and I realized I did not think my ex-husband was a good person. Actually, he was a terrible, terrible fucking person.
mhm,
And I'm like, why did I do this? And so once I got past that, and I realized I had this childhood friend, and we enjoy each other's company, and we agree on parenting styles. We it there's so much more that makes a relationship work. So that's why when people say, oh, I'm not buying that she would want to hang out with him, I absolutely buy it. He's
yeah,
being hilarious,
yeah,
he's being funny, he's being charming. Bring your little stuffed animals to make her laugh, you know
yeah.
and stuff like that. So it's yeah.
Yeah, again, but again, like taking this again and applying it to again to the movie, it just once again adds that full realism factor to this movie. That it it hits it so perfectly on the head throughout, and we're now we are now a good portion into the movie by this point, and everything. There's no point in this movie where you're like, that's not realistic. That it's hitting it so perfectly on the head. I do like Boomer's comment. That's why I'm a good person. I'm not attractive enough not to be.
I mean, me too, but
Same. But yeah.
the thing is like I look back, and it was like people dated me because I was attractive. I used to be, I was young once, and I, had the real long blonde hair, and I was, a size 3, and I had the right curves, and guys would date me because they thought I was hot, and I was like, and girls were interested in me because I was hot, and it was just like nobody gave a shit about my writing, my acting, my interests. I never had a horror buddy till much later,
Yeah.
and it was a platonic thing. People only wanted to date me because of my looks, and then my personality would get on their nerves because I'm a chatty person. I like to talk. And they're like, "Don't you ever shut up?" And I'm like,
No.
"No." But I thought that, we're in a relationship and we're doing this, and it's like, no, I really just want to fuck you, and that's it. Please shut up.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's gross.
It is, it is, it is. Okay. Let's sort of move on to the sort of more finale portion of the movie. Because we get this scene where it all just sort of falls apart for Frank.
Yes.
He's managed to get, but he's obviously killed one of Anna's models at this point. He followed her home, and he made on that she had forgotten something at the shoot. But he manages to score another date with Anna, but this time they're going to go to his mother's grave.
And they went to the Clam Casino.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that restaurant. It's a real restaurant called the Clam Casino. I'm like, ooh, maybe I need some Chinese tonight. I don't know about the Clam Casino.
But this is where it just sort of falls apart from him. They're at his mother's grave, and he just loses it at this point. It becomes overwhelming. It's almost like, the performance that he's putting on of being this, sort of suave, sophisticated, confident, nice character, nice person, and he's just unable to keep it up anymore. The issues that he has with his mother, the issues he has with commitment and women, have all just they've all overflowed for him, and he loses it.
Yeah, and I definitely think, like, if they hadn't gone to, because he wanted, it's Christmas time, he wants to go put something on his mother's grave real quick while they're getting ready to go out. And she's like, "Oh, cool," I mean, probably finds it endearing, like, oh, he misses his mom,
Yeah.
and but all these murders, he's triggered by these thoughts and remembrances of both loving and fearing his mother, and who knows, he might have killed her. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I always had this theory that he probably killed her.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes to do that, and and then he loses it. That it's too overwhelming because he's actually in the presence of his mother, and he's with a woman that I think he has some sort of love for. He's maybe in love with her.
Yeah.
And that's confusing for him. Maybe this is the first time he's felt like that, and maybe it's the first time a woman has really wanted to spend time with him. But he.
Sorry, it's just to
Go
sort of
ahead.
flip it on, because it goes back to what we were saying as well. This is someone who obviously is very inexperienced when it comes to these things, and these emotions that he's feeling are so overwhelming. And Caroline Munro is like, going back to what we were saying, she is an incredibly attractive person. She is really
Gorgeous.
a
Yeah,
gorgeous
like
person.
she's a Bond girl. If you ever watch Star Crash, she's
Yeah.
wearing next to nothing, and she's
But
gorgeous
again,
in
and
she's a brunette, which is totally my type.
but in this movie as well, though, but she's matching him, and she's challenging him, and she's talking about the things that he likes as well. Earlier on when he mentions that he's an artist, she wants to see his work. It's not a case of, oh well, I'm just going to sit here and be attractive and be this sort of, airhead character that we are so often subjected to. It's a case of, she's challenging him, she's matching him, she's giving him everything that he could possibly want as well, which would be a massively confusing thing for him as a character.
Oh yeah. I just, but I love, when he starts to lose it, and he's and I forget, oh God, I feel so stupid. I forget the model's name that she was friends with. But he's like, she knew. And Anna's starting to go, wait,
Yeah.
what the fuck? What are you talking about? What do you mean? My friend that died, what do you mean she knew?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, click, she's got it.
Yeah.
And he lunges for her, and she fucking takes that shovel and hits him, and he's like completely like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
I don't understand. We have this thing going on. Why would you not get what I'm saying? Why would you hurt me? He's like, like, why, Anna? Why'd you hurt me? And then that scream, and it's so good that the way that he screams like mother, like that, mother, and it turns into like a sob.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, incredible. And then, just to take it further as well, to go into the sort of actual finale when, you know, he's back in his flat, and you've got these mannequins, because again, you know, he's sitting there and he's like, oh well, you know, why are you hurting me? Because, you know, he doesn't think that he is actually hurting these women, because, you know, he's taking them home with him to stay with him as mannequins. You know, there's a part of
To
him that,
keep them forever, because that's what he
yeah,
says to Anna about the pictures. Like, oh, I love that you can take pictures because then you get to keep them forever. And she's like, what?
yeah,
What do you mean? And then he kind of like backtracks a little bit.
yeah. So you know, I think there is a part of him that is aware of of the things that he's doing, obviously, but, you know, I think
Like
the
when he's vomiting and crying
yeah,
about the things he's done.
but there is also that factor in him, isn't it, that just doesn't actually believe that these women that he's killed are actually dead, that they're now actually just spending forever with him in his flat, and they're just being with him.
Yeah, and I think that's very important for the climax of the film, the
Uh-huh.
very, very
Yeah,
climax.
because, you
Yeah.
know, that at the basically at the very end of the film, it's this huge emotional torment for him, that these women, even though they're mannequins, these women are turning on him, and he doesn't really understand why. There's again this sort of child. It's almost like this childlike torture thing of, you know, not really understanding why the things are happening to him the way they are, and it's incredibly sad.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the thing is like this is a serial killer. This is a story where it's not like if you remember the whole Dahmer series where, you know, a lot of these weirdos, I'm sorry, I'm gonna call you a fucking weirdo for this. These people that do this. They were saying that, you know, I feel sorry for Jeffrey Dahmer and he was kind of hot. And I'm like, he literally did homemade lobotomies and poured borax into their brains and forced them to watch Exorcist 3. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah,
But Frank Zito in Maniac, there's a part of you that kind of hurts for him, hurts for the child in him, hurts for the child that he still is. And you know, there's a saying that's as cruel as school children. Um, and it's kind of like that, like because children don't quite understand the cruelty, don't quite understand the things that they do and why they do them because they haven't matured. He's stunted
yeah,
from the physical abuse, and that can happen in extreme cases of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I'm not romanticizing him in any way. I'm just saying that there's a part of you that feels like, God, this confusing mess of a man, like what a fucking waste.
yeah,
Because he could have been amazing.
yeah. That's it.
He could have been.
We get to see what he was capable of, and you know, how he was able to be, and ultimately, you know, this is what we get. And again, you can take it back to those sorts of comparisons with the other horror villains that we get, because we never really get to see the best of them. You know, they are just
Right.
they are the big bads, you know, the big no-nos of the movie. You know, we just get to see what they're capable of.
And usually only one flat emotion, if any.
Yeah,
And it's kind of like a coldness, a cold victory. And people are attracted to that.
yeah,
For some
100%.
reason. There's something in us that it's the same energy, but not exactly what I'm meaning of like, you know, the right girl will fix him kind of energy, you know. Um, it's a saying among women, like, oh, you know, I can fix him,
Yeah,
you know. Um, you know, but that I think that's why, you know, particularly women are attracted to these sort of stoic or cold men because they're tough, they don't show emotion, and like if I could just crack that,
yeah,
I could just if I could just crack that open. But with you know, Frank Zito, you know, Spinell's character, you know, that's there, it's present. We don't have to crack anything,
hmm,
but we do also have somebody who can take a double barrel shotgun and blow somebody's fucking brains out.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's a weird mix.
Well, just sort of the final point for me as well, then, and then I'll I'll let you have the floor for sort of final thoughts before we move on. Obviously, we get this sort of final shot in the movie. You know, the police come in. We get this final shot of our character Frank opening his eyes on the bed. What is your interpretation of the final scenes of this film?
No, this is my only complaint about the film. Um, I it is okay. I love the scene where, in his mind, it's completely unraveled because he fell in love with a woman. She hurt him. She got away.
Hmm.
So she did abandon him, which is his fear. And he's finally completely unraveled, can't even hold it together at all. And so he's imagining, and then he's looking at all these mannequins where it has the women that he kills clothes on and their hair and nailed on to the scalps and all that nailed on, and he's looking at them finally as people,
Yeah.
as women who, they're angry with him. He hurt them, and he deserves to die for that. And so he has a sort of like dark, unraveling psychotic break where he's imagining them in a great, great effect scene,
Hmm.
just ripping him apart and killing him. And it is so great. And his screams are really convincing, real fear. It just sounds like he is literally like so scared he's pissing his pants, like high pitched. I mean, it is, like most men would be like, well, I'm not going to scream like a girl. I'm not going to do these things. I'm not going to sound like that. No, he's doing it, and he's so convincing in it. Just like that, he's literally being ripped apart. And we find out that he's killed himself.
Yeah.
Now, I like that. I think that's where it should stop. Or even when we go a step further and the cops show up and they come in and they see that he stabbed himself and he's dead.
Yeah.
And now they have all the evidence. Okay, this is the maniac. This is where we get the term the maniac for the film. Is that's what they were calling him in the newspapers. So they found the maniac. And but the thing is like they just like I don't know. I felt like if they would have been like just ended right there, but we see him stand there, look at him like, yeah, he looks dead. He looked dead to you. I mean, I don't say it. They just kind of look at each other, and then they walk out.
Yeah.
And I have a problem with that. And then the eye opening, and I'm like, okay, I really no. Even if we keep the cops being bumbling, which cops are, I'm not a big fan of cops. Um, but the eye opening was not necessary. Like don't try to set me up for a sequel. This is an unsequelable movie, even though he tried to develop one.
I
Um,
don't
Mr. Robbie.
I don't even think for me it's not the eye opening that really irritates me about this sort of final. It is simply the fact that the police then walk back, like leave. That's the part. Like I remember watching this for the first time, and it really confused me. I really like I had to go back and watch it again because I was just like I don't understand what's just happened. I actually had felt like that I'd missed a part of the movie, like there'd maybe been a scene deleted or just something that I'd maybe missed because it just didn't make any sort of sense to me. I don't particularly care if
Yeah,
they're like
it was
you
really
know
strange.
I don't particularly care if they're trying to open it up for sequel bait or whatever. And like you say, I know he did try and develop his own sequel. For me, that's
And the sequel, I mean, you can find it online, like the little teaser trailer for
yeah.
it that he kind of filmed. Um, but it was he was a children's show host who was trying to avenge kids who had been wronged by killing their parents. Is the premise for that?
Yeah.
It's sort of it was supposed to be like an unofficial, like it wasn't like Maniac 2 or anything,
Yeah.
but sort of going with that premise of a killer, but a killer with a purpose long before Dexter, a killer who kills killers.
Yeah. So yeah, I think again, I think we're relatively on the same wavelength here. It's probably the one and only issue part of the movie that I have. Maybe slight differences in the area. We've gone through all of my notes. We've eventually managed to get through all of my notes, but I will absolutely open the floor now for you if you would like to ever any other aspects of this movie you'd like to talk about, any other scenes, particular moments, anything at all that you'd like to
I think there's some
mention.
interesting behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn Monroe's husband. Well, okay, no, first I have to backtrack. Um, Daria Nicolodi, who was Dario Argento's wife at the time, they hadn't gotten divorced yet. She was supposed to play Anna. That's why Anna's name is Anna Dentoni, because she was supposed to be Italian.
Yeah.
Like, because Daria Nicolodi is obviously Italian. How weird is it that Dario Argento's wife is named Daria? It's like Dario and Daria. Anyway, oh, I always like to say that. But so she ended up not being able to do the film.
Yeah.
So they got Carolyn Monroe, who was already friends with Joe Spinell, but she has a husband who's a producer, and I can't recall his name. But he was in Star Crash with them, because so he did some acting as well. But his deal was, you can get Carolyn Monroe because he was also her manager, but she can't be killed. She has to get away.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some push on that, because Joe Spinell and then, with all of them working on the story, they wanted her to die, but then, still have an unraveling because he was in love with her. But they're like, he said, nope, you can't kill her.
Yeah.
So I think that worked out for the best, honestly. But I just thought it was interesting, this little, that it was supposed to be Daria Nicolodi, who I think is a great actress. Tenebrae is my favorite giallo of all time, my favorite Argento film,
Mm-hmm.
and she's fantastic as Anne in that. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see her in the role. But I love Carolyn Monroe, and like I said, I also loved her longtime friendship with Joe Spinell.
Yeah, and I think there's in those scenes in particular that we've discussed, when they're on the date, and the chemistry that is actually there between them. I actually think without that, we really maybe would have felt a little bit hollow going into the final scenes of this movie. It's the fact that going into the big finale, we can see just how well these two get on. Like you say, we've talked about all the various aspects of it. We've talked about the, what's a girl like her, like looks like her doing with a guy like that. We've talked about all those aspects of it, but like we physically see why. We see the chemistry. And to me, that's what.
Yeah, they absolutely have a great chemistry in every film they did together.
Yeah.
I also like to recommend the last horror movie, which they did together, as well. He plays a filmmaker who wants her to be Carolyn Monroe's character in the film, and she doesn't want to do it, so he starts like killing people and filming it, and then once he's like filming her and sneaking around filming her in showers. I don't want to give the whole plot away, but the chemistry is also there too. I mean, they just really work well together, and I just like that they were really friends, and it brings that warmth, because without that warmth between them, I really feel like this movie would have been just like a lot of other serial killer movies.
Yeah.
I think it's so important, and it also makes the payoff and the guilt finally taking over it, and her actually abandoning him, like he was afraid of, like he fears that so deeply, so intensely, he couldn't keep her. And so and us already having established that warmth and that chemistry and that friendship, that may be a little bit more because she's kind of into him for being funny and goofy and whatever. We need that.
Yeah.
We need that for this movie to work and on 100%.
Yeah, 100%. And specific part, specific lines even. We again, we've mentioned it, that line where he's like, "Why would you hurt me?" It just carries so much more weight because of the chemistry that we've seen, because of the relationship that these two had. It makes it feel, you feel the devastation.
Yes. And I think it's important that we feel the feelings that we do. And he's so effective, as a character actor, and this being his first starring role, and really his only role as the leading man, even though it's a serial killer movie. He really shows off some great acting chops, and tells us so much without telling us these things. Just sometimes it's just like him muttering to himself, and it doesn't feel like it's being expositionary. It feels natural for this character. I just I think it's
I mean,
great.
as a movie, going into some of the sort of more actual technicals of it, it's a pretty bog standard runtime as well for a movie, and it actually it feels it feels like a very short film. The movie's,
Yeah.
I think it's like 87 minutes, so it's a pretty standard runtime. It's not particularly short, it's not particularly long, but it flows so smoothly. And even though some of those scenes that we talked about earlier as well, like the strangulation scene and things like that, we maybe hover on those scenes for just a couple of minutes longer than you maybe traditionally would feel like. I think the pacing of this movie is really perfect as well.
And it's amazing. It's like lightning in a bottle. We've got somebody in their first starring role.
Mm-hmm.
We've managed to snag a Bond girl. Um, we've got somebody who has only directed porn. Um, this is his first legit film. Everything clicked. I mean, everything was running exactly the way it needed to run, and it ended up so perfect. Even with some of the pushback and changes that needed to happen, it's like they were perfect. They were the right thing to do, and everything just came together so well. Like you can't recapture that.
Yeah.
I don't. Then that's the thing about the Maniac remake. Great, it's good, it's fine, but it's not lightning in a bottle.
No.
Fine, you know what I mean? It's a little too slick.
Yeah. No, I totally get you. Just going back
But
to
I don't hate it.
yeah, back to what we were saying earlier. Boomer says his favorite is opera, but would agree that Tenebrae is probably the best out of those.
I have this amazing that I can't remember who did it, and it was a limited run, so it's out of print now. But it's this huge Tenebrae set, and it has all four versions of the movie. It has the lobby cards, it has the booklet about it, and it has this amazing artwork. Um, I can't. I'll have to look it up and post it later on
Yeah.
Twitter so everybody can see it because it's fucking great. But yeah, with Tenebrae, it's just like I don't know. It's actually Argento doing Giallo with no supernatural, and that's what Giallo is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And Argento is the one who made Giallo supernatural a thing because Giallo is just really a crime movie, which is where slashers were born from. But Tenebrae is fucking some peak shit. I fucking love it.
Awesome. Okay.
That's a whole different conversation. Sorry.
On that note, we will move on now then to our next segment because we'll still be able to talk about aspects of the film and any other bits and pieces that you maybe want to slip in there as well. So we'll move on to our next segment and we'll talk about some trivia. I feel like we've just done a whole episode of trivia about this movie, but there's a few other little bits and pieces that I'm sure we'll be able to throw in. So, as always, we'll start off with the finances. According to IMDb, this movie had a budget of $350,000. I have read that budget, of course, was not really studio provided. That was an amalgamation of various people. Donating and fundraising the money. Some of it was William Lustig's his own
some was
money.
Spinell's money.
Yeah,
some was
Spinell's
Lustig's
money.
money.
Yeah, so they really just cobbled together. I think initially I read their budget was about 50K, and then they had someone.
Yeah, and I think Carolyn Monroe's producer husband came up with quite a bit.
Yeah, that's right. I think he came up with. I think I read he came up with 200K. And the rest was from various other sources, including Lustig and Spinell. So that also just goes to show what a passion project it actually was for Spinell. That he's put, because the money that he was putting in was from his previous films. It was paychecks from his previous films.
Yeah, those huge residuals from the Godfather movies.
So it just shows you what a passion project it actually was for him, and that definitely comes off on screen as well. According to, again, IMDb, the box office for this movie was 4.5 million. So I mean that's obviously not from various different factors and various different times as well. So the accuracy of that is always, as always when we do this, is can be contested.
Yes.
As I've already said, Lustig and Spinell have openly stated that they didn't always have the necessary permits to film on location. Certain scenes, including the infamous shotgun through the windshield scene, had to be filmed quickly, and afterwards the crew had to run away before the cops arrived. So I do kind of like I do kind of like just the thought that you know Tom Savini's just blown this effects sort of away with the shotgun and then just having to scurry off. You know, I do like that image. Um, uh, as I said, so obviously, you know, being low budget, they had to keep the costs of this movie down. We've alluded to it, we've brought it up. You know, they did hire several porn actresses, several adult film
Yes,
stars in for this for some of the extra and filler roles as well. You know, to play some of those sort of
the
victims
six
as well.
connections.
Yeah. And you know, but the movie, you know, is great for it. You know, they, you know, some of these women are playing, you know, sex workers anyway in the movie, and so it kind of works out, right?
Yeah,
Um, as I've said earlier, the headless corpse at the end is the Betsy Palmer corpse, Jason's mother from Friday the 13th. They did also recycle some footage from some helicopter shots from the movie Inferno as well, which was also released in 1980. So, you know, again, you know,
yeah,
it's just the creativeness to be able to keep the cost down. You know, it's something that, you know, I think can sometimes be a bit lacking. The LA Times apparently refused to run ads for this film due to the graphic content of not only the film but its poster. You know, we've talked about the poster a little bit there at the beginning. Obviously, the poster that we're all familiar with is that sort of the scalp with the knife in one hand and the hair in the other. But obviously, you know, like you say, there was other concept arts for the posters and things, and that was changed. But it has become a very iconic image amongst horror fans, is that poster, isn't it? It's something that if you show to
yes,
any sort of hardcore horror fan, they know instantly what that is.
yep.
And
And
sorry, carry on.
what's funny about that poster, yeah, is that they rejected so many, and then Smell wanted the one with his face, which I have this shirt of, and it's just amazing. I actually like that poster a lot, but the one that they went with, I warned you not to go out tonight. They're like, oh, I guess that one's okay. I mean, he's holding a knife and a scalp, but he's also got a massive erection. If you really look. And they were like, yeah, that's the one. It's okay, right? And it's like, he's got a huge boner. All right, then. Which is weird because it doesn't fit the character at all.
Yeah, no,
Because he was
it
kind of
is.
like sex averse.
Yeah, it is an odd one. Yeah, definitely. The last piece of trivia I've got, and then once again, yeah, I'll open up to the floor to you if you have anything else. So, the movie initially was not given a rating by the MPAA. Filmmakers knew it was going to receive the X rating for violence and gore, so they didn't submit it for a rating because at the time it was
So they
easier.
went with like the, yeah, not rated.
Yeah, it was
Just
easy.
no one under 17.
It was easier for unrated films to still be shown in theaters than X-rated ones, um, because of the way X-rated films were viewed as being largely pornographic and
And you
various.
know who got that started was Romero, right?
Yeah,
Because of Dawn of the Dead.
yeah,
Romero created sort of what's called NC-17, but the not rated, which
yeah.
is basically NC-17, with Dawn of the Dead. So yeah, and a lot of the more intense films, which that was a good time for horror. They would just, it's not rated, but you might want to be over 17.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
sometimes
I
they
mean,
would be like no one under 17 admitted.
yeah. So that's the trivia that I have noted down for this movie. If you have any other pieces of trivia or any interesting tidbits off the top of your head about Maniac, feel free to share them. This is your opportunity before we move on.
Um, I feel like I've kind of thrown out a lot of it. Um, yeah, I mean, I just yeah, I feel like I've covered most of the stuff. I know there's probably stuff I'm forgetting. A lot of it is in the Joe Spinell story, that little featurette, kind of mini documentary on the Blue Underground version of the Maniac Blu-ray, which again I highly recommend. But there's there's a lot of info in there on it, and I've probably forgotten some of it right
That's
now.
all right. Well, having said that, as an episode, we released our last episode last week on Five Nights at Freddy's. We still have a full segment to go, and we're already 50 minutes over our Five Nights at Freddy's episode.
I'm sorry.
So, and I'm sure
This is my second favorite horror film of all time. So I had to say a lot of
behind.
But what's behind? Well, there's a three-way tie for number one because I do that, and you know what they are, right?
I know what they are.
Night of the Living Dead.
Yep.
Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And Day of the Dead are all tied for one, and then Maniac.
So technically, it's your fourth favorite of all time, right?
In candy logic, it's my second.
Okay. Anyways, with that,
that's like picking my favorite child. I can't just pick one of those.
With that being said, let's move on then to our final segment, which is our ratings and our reviews. As always, we'll start off with the critics' scores. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Rotten Tomatoes critics and audience scores for this movie. So
I can't remember because we did I don't know, maybe
that's fine. So we'll do our guessing game because I've not been able to do that for a while. But before we do that, IMDb has this down as a 6.4. Metacritic, which is always the harshest, I think, of all the sort of critics sites. They have this at a 2.2.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, so
it must suck to be that wrong.
What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes critics and the Rotten Tomatoes audience is
critics? Now the thing is like when I think of critics, I'm thinking the very famous Gene. This is one of my favorite Siskel neighbor things.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of at the time. I think now, if we're considering now, I would say maybe 60.
So the critics,
on critics.
Rotten Tomatoes critics has this at 40%.
Damn.
So yeah,
wrong.
It's
it seems like it would be something that critics would love because it's very. It's a neat little cinema piece.
Well, I also feel as well though, for sort of, tomato authorized critics as well, which I am not one of, and I have no real desire to ever be one of. But Maniac to me does kind of feel like a kind of movie that if horror's not your bag, if horror's not your vibe, you're not seeking out Maniac to go and watch.
It's true. I mean, it is very niche. It's definitely royalty in the horror genre. So when I think about critics, I forget about critics judge all movies.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying. I feel like that's therefore the critic score should actually be higher for this, because I feel like that's a kind of movie that some critics, because again, we're talking, Rotten Tomatoes, so we're talking about some more modern critics. We're not going back to Ebert and things like that.
Right, so that's why I was I bumped it up.
Yeah,
higher,
well, no, I would have been in the same part too. Anyways, quickly before we go, the Rotten Tomatoes audience, any predictions for what you think they've scored this?
Definitely higher than the critics, so I'm gonna go with I'll stay with my 60%.
You're pretty close with that one. They are higher. The Rotten Tomatoes audience has this at 58%, so they're closer to being on the right track.
Good.
As always, we throw it out to you guys, our followers, listeners, viewers, subscribers, and ask for your scores and opinions on this movie, and read just a few of them out on the show. Our friend Tim from the Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast. This film definitely belongs in the top 10 slasher films of all-time discussion. Much like most great slasher films, the story is simple, yet still feels weirdly original. Making this film stand out from the others is Joe Spinell's performance and Tom Savini's effects. With all that being said, I'm going 8 out of 10. So that's an 8 out of 10 from Tim. This definitely seems like the kind of film that he would love, to be
nicely
fair.
done, Tim. I mean, that's really good. I dig it.
Yeah. Wren, we've already mentioned Wren a couple of times. Great friend of the show, of both of our shows, part of our podcast
I love his
families.
reviews. Wren gives great reviews.
Ren normally gives me like 4 paragraph reviews as well. I think he just wants to hear me like run out of breath, but he's kept himself quite succinct for this one. Another one of those films you feel wrong and gross for watching, much like TCM and Henry, a deeply disturbing lesson in shooting guerrilla style with a tiny budget while still being immensely effective. New filmmakers should start here if they are in the slasher business. 7 out of 10. Yeah, again, you know, I think he's put that pretty well and pretty perfectly.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty on the nose.
Yeah. Sarah Marie also gives it a 7 out of 10. Joe Spinell truly played a maniac. He really gave an excellent performance. The movie always felt infamous, like I'm watching something I shouldn't. It's gritty, dirty, and unapologetic. Yeah, noticing some themes starting to come on now. Our friend of the show, Newman from the Movies for Days podcast, gives it a 9 out of 10. An iconic classic of the era, Joe Spinell is a triumph of madness. The kills are creative and will burn themselves into your memory. The stock sequences are the very definition of tension in this horrifying and always rewatchable ride. So, you know, people...
Oh, yeah, that was beautiful.
People loving it. Better Wolf on Twitter gives it 10 out of 10. Joe Spinell and Caroline Munro are truly magical together, which they explored to new heights in the last horror film, and Ton Savini's exploding head is pure bombast. Maniac isn't just dark and disturbing, it's also funny as hell. I don't know.
These are some great reviews.
I know, right? This is Joe Spinell would have loved to have listened to this.
Yeah.
And finally, Will Cruck, also on Twitter, gives it a solid 7 out of 10. Great, mean-spirited 80s slasher, and the Elijah Wood remake is really good too. So there you go. So it's pretty well liked across the board. We took obviously adding up all the scores that we got and all the submissions that we got. Our listeners gave this movie a 7.5 out of 10. So, you know, much more of the type of score that I think this movie deserves. And therefore, that just leaves me and you, Candy. So on a scale of 0 to 10, what would you rate Maniac?
I'm going to preface it really quick. When we covered it on The House That Screams, I was so pumped, but I was so irritated about those last couple of seconds in the movie that I docked at half a point. And I've wanted to fix it for years, and I'm going to do it today. I'm doing it today because the rest of the movie and everything else is so goddamn motherfucking perfect. Like I said, lightning in a bottle. I have to give it 10 out of 10. And I'm sorry for docking at the half point years ago. I wanted to fix it for years, and I'm doing that today. 10 out of 10.
Do you really feel like you've
10 out of 10 sweaty Joe Spinells.
Nice. You really feel like you have righted a wrong today.
I have done that, yes. Today is that day.
Listen, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that it's very, very high up on my list. I'm going to be giving it a very high score as well. All of the things that we've said this movie is, and all of the things that our listener said is there. I think that was possibly one of the finer sort of selection of reviews from our listeners that we've had, because
there wasn't one bad one.
They also all managed to, you know, they said everything that this movie is so succinctly. You know, it is so incredibly effective in the tension. It's so incredibly effective in the effects, the performances, the chemistry. There is very, very little that you can say negatively about this movie. Yeah, okay, we've maybe got a slight issue with a couple of the smaller things that happen right there at the very end in the final scene. Is that something that ruins my enjoyment of this movie? Absolutely not. The only reason that this is going to get this score rather than something ever so slightly higher, again, for me, is simply because there are other movies that I would probably still put above this. I'm going to give Maniac a 9 out of 10, though, so that's... as someone, I think...
Hey, you know what? That is acceptable, and I know how you rate, and I'm really happy to hear you say that.
Well, it's one of those things as well, isn't it? Like, you know, like I am stricter at my ratings on this show than I tend to be when I guest on other people's shows. I do tend to try and sort of keep things in a slight order as well. We will later on, when Nico returns to the show, I will get Nico's ratings for this movie and I will add it in. I've got a funny feeling that he's going to be pretty high on this as well. I've never actually spoken to him about this movie.
Awesome.
I've got a feeling though it's going to be something he really likes, and I hope so as well, because given all of our scores, and unfortunately combined with some of those low critic scores, given our process for our leaderboard, it does mean that Maniac only gets a 6.4 out of 10. Which is it's not the worst, but it doesn't put it particularly high on our leaderboard. It's in 56th place, which is a little disappointing. It's really that Metacritic score with at 2.2. I can't believe they
Metacritic is brutal.
You know, it is. Out of all the critic sites that we take, we obviously take IMDb, Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes, and add them in for, and we find it generally tends to work out balance wise in terms of our leaderboard. I think if you was to go down our leaderboard, with a few exceptions, and Maniac is definitely going to fall into that category of being one of those few exceptions, but if you was to go down our leaderboard, you generally find that things are possibly in the place that you would expect them to be. But Maniac is definitely one of those exceptions where I think, for me, in terms of this leaderboard, should at least be, you know, a solid 20 to 25 places higher than it currently is.
Yeah,
it should really, I think, be hitting that sort of top 20 mark when you look at some of the movies that's above it. It's currently one place above Censor, the 2021 movie Censor, that currently sits in 57th place. It's one place below the Blair Witch Project.
Really? Yeah. That many people like the Blair Witch Project? I was not impressed.
Can I just point this out? Because I like the Blair Witch Project. Nico does not. He hates the Blair Witch Project.
I don't like it either.
Can I just point out, though, Metacritic, just to show this. So 2.2 they gave Maniac. Metacritic has the Blair Witch Project at an 8.1.
Jesus Christ.
So there you have it.
See, when we do ours, I mean, we don't do the math on them. We just kind of say them during Sean's shitty reviews, because he like prefaces the shitty reviews.
Yeah.
Like when I read, because whenever we put out on social media, like I'm doing this movie, usually most reviews are pretty good. Yeah. So I read the good stuff. I'm the angel, and he gets to be the demon. But he gives the Rotten Tomatoes, and he does IMDb, and we just leave out Metacritic. Like we don't add them up or anything. We're just kind of like, yeah, this is what these people say, and then we go into our reviews.
Yeah.
So, you know.
I always find
Metacritic pisses me off.
Yeah. I always find it really interesting for me, from like a completionist sort of standpoint, to sort of do the math on it and see where everything sort of comes.
No, I like that you do that. I think it's awesome. I love that about yourself.
I think it gives me a bit of sort of confidence in what I'm doing as well, when I'm rating things, and I can see, you know, whether or not I'm in the minority or the majority. Because sometimes, sometimes like we all know that we're in the majority or the minority when it comes to a movie opinion, but sometimes we don't, and that's sometimes
like me in Pieces. I love Pieces, but everybody on the show was like, "Why are you doing this to me, Candy?"
I'll never forgive Boomer for making me review that movie for.
I fucking love it. I love it because it's so god awful. I love it.
The thing is, we reviewed a second movie on that episode, and still, and I've asked him to remind me about what that was, and still to this day I cannot remember what the other movie that we reviewed was, simply because I cannot get that god awful piece of shit Pieces out of my head.
But it's exactly what you think it is. No.
Oh yeah,
I have from Paul Bearer Press. They have a really cool like Pieces collection, and they have like these jogger shorts, so like they're sweatpants but they're shorts. And I have it has the chainsaw with all the blood, and it says it's exactly what you think it is. I'm like, yeah, God, I love that movie. And I have this shirt from Fright Rags that's like blue, and it has they're going bastard. You know, I'm just like, I fucking love that. I will die on that hill. That's where I know I'm in the minority.
Yeah, it's like me and my Child's Play remake opinions. That's where I know.
Oh, bless your heart. That's your hill. Yep.
That's it. There you go. Boomer's coming in. It was Your Next. The other movie was Your Next, and I picked that one, and that's how much of an effect Pieces had on me. Is that I forgot the movie that I had picked. You know, that's
well. At least it made a good. Well, no, I wouldn't say good. It made a big impression.
You know what? It didn't commit the cardinal sin. It wasn't boring. You know, that's the cardinal horror sin, isn't it?
It definitely wasn't boring because it's just like so fucking ridiculous and unintentionally hilarious. The waterbed kill, come on, that's comedy right there. That's great.
Anyways, with all of that being said, that is gonna do it for this week's episode. Candy, thank you so much for coming on the show. Finally getting to talk about Maniac. We did it eventually. You know, we've been like I say, talking about this for months on end, and we finally managed to get our schedules together and get this
Well, the
episode
build up
recorded.
was worth it because this was so fun, and I love this movie, and I consider myself sort of an authority on it because I'm the maniac for Maniac. But I don't know why I love this movie so much, but it's probably just because it's so fucking great. It's
Yeah.
just really great,
Um. We'll,
and I
we'll
love talking about it. So thank you for having me on.
No problem at all. We'll do our final sort of plugs in that, and then I'll end the show. But if you stay on the line for just the last few minutes, and we can do our usual debrief chat before
Okay.
we go away for the night. Thank you, like I say though, thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in live. Boomer, who's been contributing away in the chat. There's been a whole host of other people who've been coming in, lurking away. I can see you all there in the chat room, so thank you so much. Another thank you to you, Candy, as well, because you've been cheering away some bits there in the chat room throughout this episode. Thank you very much for that as well. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Lots to cheer for.
Would you like to do the final plugs for the house that screams, and some of your other stuff as well?
Yeah. House That Screams is so fun. I mean, that's all I can explain us. We're just fun. Um, Probably the most unserious horror podcast in the world because there's so many of us and it's just chaos. It's controlled chaos. I mean, I have some control, I guess. Um, because I'm the bossiest. Um, and but I do all of our schedules and all that. But yeah, you can find us on Twitter at house_screams. That's me. Please join our broadcast channel on Instagram. Um, Trying to put together a fundraiser dealing with the horror community and mental health. I think that horror heals. It's definitely helped me. I'm very open about my mental illness. I have post-traumatic stress disorder and panic disorder, and it has helped me tremendously. Horror has always healed me, and my therapist gets it, and so that's great. So we're gonna try to put together a fundraiser, getting all of our little extended horror family involved too. Hopefully, we can get you on board.
Yeah,
We want to
absolutely.
do a big do and raise some money for mental health for the horror community. So because it's such an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such an important thing. So yeah, check out our broadcast channel for that, where we're kind of polling and getting ideas. But that's Candy the Final Girl on Instagram. Final Girl Cosmetics, we've got some really awesome stuff coming out. That's Erica and I. She's one of the House of Screams members. We own a makeup company. It's Final Girl Cosmetics.makeup. We've got some really awesome products. Our stuff is top tier. It's cruelty free. It is vegan. It is not tested on animals, anything like that. And it also is good. I wear it exclusively. I don't have any on today. If you can see this video, I literally look the schlubbiest I can look because I'm trying to get my hair back to its natural blonde. But anyway, um, what else? I write for Ghouls Magazine, but I've taken a little sabbatical. I studied journalism in school for my creative writing, but I'm actually a fiction writer, so I'm working on a horror novel at the moment. And there'll be more on that. But go to my link tree because I not only link for myself, but I link for other people and Ethipod Network, everybody in it. That's Ian right here running that, and he's got a great, wonderful little family of all of us, little crazy people. Um, I mean crazy in the nicest way because
Yeah.
I'm not going to make fun of mental health. But yeah, we're zany, I should say.
Yeah.
I really love you for getting us all together and running that. So I'll plug us. Check out FE Pod Network. That that Ian
Yeah.
runs. So because it's a wonderful group of people, a great bunch of podcasts. If you just listen to those podcasts, you're just gonna get everything you need in horror. You're
Yeah.
gonna get it all.
There's some incredible podcasts in there, and that's tooting our own horns there as well, Candy. You've got obviously us here on Pod of the Damned, but you've got the House That Screams, you've got Podcasts in the Woods, you've got Barrens Hideout, you've got, you know, General Witchfinders, you've got Sledgehammer, you've got Dawn with the Horror Countdown. There's some absolutely incredible horror podcasts in our community. You know, you've got Tim as well there, and from Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks. They're I think our most recent members that joined them. And if anyone wants to sort of get a taste of what it's like when some of us all come together, I would highly recommend checking out Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks horror trivia episode that we all appeared on a couple of months
that was
ago.
basically all almost all exclusively FE Pod Network. There were a couple of other people in there, but we're all battling it out. And three of us got first, second, and third from FE Pod Network. So I'm just saying that's the place to be.
That's absolutely the place to be, unless you're named Boomer.
Bless Boomer's heart.
Boomer, you tried. We love you so much.
He reminds me of like Ash Williamson for some reason. That's not Williamson, Ash Williams. And that's a cool thing because my son's name's after him, Ash. But also just one last thing. Again, I just want to bring up Paul Bearer Press again. Yep. PaulBearerPress.com. They're always at cons, but they do some of the most graphic, awesome shirts. Like I have a lot of cool Fulci shirts from them, but we are sponsored by them. And they're the perfect fit for the House That Screams. Just chaos, crazy colors, like really bright neons, and they've got such amazing clothes. And you can get 10% off. And the more you use that discount, the more I'm going to be able to give you a bigger discount from Paul Bearer Press. So you know, just keep using that House Scream 10 for 10% off at paulbearerpress.com. So that's it for me.
As I said at the beginning of the episode, we'll put some of those links, we'll put the link tree in the description for this episode. It is currently across all of our social medias as well. If you would like to support us here at the Pod of the Damned on social media, we're on X at Damned Podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Pod of the Damned. You can follow the network that we were talking about, the FE Pod Network, which is also on Twitter. I'm just going to call it Twitter because it's fucking Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just easier. Yeah, it's Twitter.
You know, like I say, as I said to you, Candy, at the beginning, obviously we took a bit of a break over spooky season, which is always something that's really disappointing for me to do because I hate
we did the same thing.
I hate missing out on spooky season. I do have some really fun personal stuff going on with work and things like that, and I'm starting to move more because I've been working in hospitality for a number of years. I do bartending, I do bar management, I do bar consultancy and things like that. And over the past number of weeks, I've been I've been testing my hands at sort of doing some sort of live entertainment. I've been hosting some pub quizzes and doing a bit of DJing. So you know that's
that's awesome.
All stuff that you know it's. But it is also time consuming, just like everything else. So, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun, and I've really been enjoying it. But obviously, Pod of the Damned's not absolutely not going anywhere. We'll be back.
Same for the House That Screams. We did the same break. I make soap and body washes, bubble baths. That's all coming to Final Girl Cosmetics. But awesome. I have like basically a science lab, and I cook in my kitchen, and I keep testing these things out. Not tested on animals, but definitely tested on humans. And cool bath bombs. Like I've got like Belial from fucking Basket Case, a bath bomb of that's like green and it smells like apples, and you know, stuff that I've been working really hard on. So I've been doing the same thing, like a lot of really exciting cool shit on the side, but House That Screams is here to stay.
Awesome. We've got some really exciting episodes coming up with, again, a load of special guests. Anna, who was on our last episode of Five Nights at Freddy's, she's coming back on the show in the next couple of weeks to talk about The Woman in Black with Daniel Radcliffe.
Nice.
That's a movie that that's a one for her request. She's been requesting that we recover that one for some time, so we're going to get that done. Nico is back on Wednesday. We're going to be live here again on Wednesday night, and we're going to be doing a double bill of two movies that really don't go together. Terrifier 2 and Hocus Pocus is going to be our Wednesday.
That's like Whiplash. Like, what's going on here?
That's our double bill. Those were the Halloween picks that we didn't get to do on Halloween, so we're going to do a double bill of them on Wednesday. Tim from the Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast will be coming on the show again also in the next couple of weeks as well, and we're going to be talking about the new movie Talk to Me, which has been so well received.
Oh
I'm
God.
really looking.
Yeah, I saw that, and then my son just bought the Blu-ray of it. Like, I'll give you my review right now. It was fucking amazing.
Yeah, I've heard absolutely nothing but good things. Um, Great segue because it's been like the number one nominated thing for all of our categories at our end of year horror awards, which if you follow us on social media you will know we are right in the middle of the voting season for. We've started
Yeah, it's
voting.
movie of the year for me.
It was the number one nominated movie, but that doesn't always necessarily means it wins. It just means it's got the easiest path when it comes to the bracket, because we all our votes are done by you guys, our listeners. Me and Nico, we don't have any say in who wins any of our categories. The only thing we have input in is our own picks for our horror hall of fame. So all of our categories, whether that's best movie or best series, best director, most unexpected success, best kill, best score, it's all done by you guys. Absolutely no input from us. So that's why we do it the way we do it. But Talk to Me is up for so many of our awards. But go on to our social medias that I've just mentioned as well, and cast your votes. That voting will be taking place over the course of the next 3 or so weeks. And the
I gotta be honest with you, I double vote because I rarely use my personal account. Like this, I'm always like, could you send it to the House of Screams? Um, because that's where like all of our followers are. We just hit 5K. I was so happy. But I vote with Candy the Final Girl, my Final Girl Candy account, and I vote with the House of Screams one too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
Double vote.
it's so close though between some of the categories. You know, today is the first round of the Horror Hall of Fame voting,
And you
and
know what my votes were.
I know exactly what your votes were, but just looking at
You
like
know exactly because they're the same ones every year because I'm waiting for it to happen. I'm waiting
um
for it to happen.
up until like the last few votes, like this is how like crazy, not saying that she isn't deserving of protect, like given the legacy of in horror that she has, but Sarah Michelle Gellar was actually winning against Robert England in their
I
head to
know I saw that
head.
and I was like, I love her, but it's Robert England.
Yeah,
Come on.
you know, so like that's it's turned around at the minute. Robert England's back in front, but you know, there's other people on there, some absolutely huge names. Obviously, you know, we've got the people who were already inducted from the last couple of years. They're exempt, but you know, people like George Romero's there up for it.
That I've been voting for years.
You have Tom Savini's on there though as well, and you know, I think that's
And
always a
also voting for him for
that's
8 years.
I think last year I think them two came together in a head to head, and I think you just about had an aneurysm.
I know, and I was like, why would you do this to me?
I hate to tell you that I think it's gonna happen again.
No.
But you know, so like there's loads of fun. But again, you know, there's always some surprising things. But that is going to be our very first episode of 2024. That's how we start off the new year. And then coming up as well, as I said at the very beginning, you know, we're fast approaching our 100th episode, so we'll do something a bit, hopefully a bit special for our 100th episode. We finally got
I'm
there.
excited for you.
You know, our 101st. We have our plans for our 101st episode. We just don't have our plans for our 100th episode. Our 101st episode.
Well, any way that I can help out, or me or my squad can help you, you know that we will.
Awesome. Our 101st episode is our re-ranking episode. We're both getting to pick 3 movies that we maybe feel that we mis-scored.
And you know what's funny is like we've been talking about doing that for a couple of years, and we've never gotten around to it because we get a little slothful at times.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, we're just gonna do what someone's got. I don't know, but because I get a little burnout. But you know what? My re-ranking episode. The whole reason I wanted to do it was because I wanted to fix my Maniac score. So never mind.
Yeah. So
But I wanted to say something really quick.
Of course.
Because while you're bringing this up, you get your episodes out right away because we're always about 6 deep because Sean's the only person who can do all the editing because we do some complicated shit to it. And I don't know how to do it. So and he works a lot, so it's like we were always behind. But I wanted to say something. We have a very special guest on our next episode next week because we record on Thursdays. Is Motel Hell. Now my mother, she was recently widowed last year. She moved back to Indiana, where I live, the heartland of America. Anyway, it's a really affordable to live nice here. I live very nicely here because cost of living's great. But anyway, so she's back. I'm going to stay with her. And my mom got me into horror when I was a kid, and she's doing the fucking episode.
I
My
can't
mom
wait.
is guesting on an episode. She has been on, talked about and built up. She's like this legend already. So I'm like, holy shit, my mom's gonna do a fucking episode. She's doing Motel Hell. It's gonna be great.
That's incredible. I really, really
She's gonna be
cannot.
my co-host, so that's gonna be wild as shit.
I
So
can't
stay
wait.
tuned
That
for
is
that.
definitely getting listened to as soon as it drops. So,
And if you think I talk a lot, you're gonna realize that I'm the quiet one in the family. I tell people that all the time, and they meet my family and they're like, "Holy shit, Candy, you were right." I'm like, I am the quiet one in the family.
yeah, are people going to have a newfound appreciation for you?
They're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, Candy actually seems really calm and reserved and quiet compared to the rest of her fucking family."
Well, I can't wait for that as well. As I said, yeah, our 101st episode is going to be our re-ranking. We're both picking 3 movies, but it's also going to give me an opportunity as well to go back over all of those critic scores as well, whether that's IMDb or Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes, because some of those will have been updated since we did an episode as well, especially for some of the newer titles that we've covered too.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a quick re-ranking and just see where things lie.
Well, I'm curious to hear that. That's
Yeah,
gonna be
so-
interesting.
Well, I mean, like I mean, we got a few episodes ago. There was a disturbance in the force, and we had a new movie in the top 3. So, that doesn't happen
Yeah,
often
I
on the
noticed
show.
that Reanimator went down, and I'm like, "Whoa, no!"
It's still in the top 5. It's still in our top 5.
It is still in top 5, but I was still like, "No,
Yeah,
no, Reanimator,
we've
no."
done it was sitting in 3rd place for the longest time, but
Yeah, because that was an earlier on episode
that was
for you.
I think that was maybe like our 10th or 15th, somewhere in that region.
Yeah, and
of
I was so
episodes.
proud that it stayed there through all of these episodes, and then
yeah.
it went down. I was like, "Oh
But
man!"
I mean, the movies that have gone above it. I mean, it's The Thing in 4th.
They deserve it.
It's Halloween in 3rd. It's Jaws in 2nd, and Alien in number 1. So there's not a stinker there above it. So,
Yeah, I mean, exactly. They deserve it. They deserve it.
if you watch those 5 movies back to back, that's a pretty good afternoon. So.
Yeah, shit, you're getting like top shelf right there.
It could be worse. It could be down the other end where we've also had a movie infiltrate our bottom 5 recently as well, because we did Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
No, bless your heart. I wasn't even watching that shit. I was like, I value my time. My time is expensive.
Nico gave the movie the same score he gave the Blair Witch Project. So yeah,
wow.
That's what we thought about that. Anyways, right, I'm really rabbiting on now. Thank you to everyone once again. And until next week on the Pod of the Damned, just remember, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.